We'll ask staff to call the roll.
Okay, perfect. Board Member Met?
Here.
Board Member Mann?
Here.
Board Member Blythe?
Here.
Board Member McLaughlin is absent, and Chair Basinger.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is public comments not related to items on the agenda. I don't have a comment card indicating that there are any. So we will move directly to the next item. 3A, regarding the Kanema cottages. And for that, we'll open a public hearing. We do have the procedures over here, and we will follow those. I am going to read the compulsory script here. The following is to be read prior to the opening of the first quasi-judicial public hearing on the agenda. That's 3A. One public hearing on land use is scheduled for tonight. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that are applied to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the commission will follow is set out in a state law and Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown in the chart on the wall. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. They are located outside the door. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so that the city will notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. A person may submit any written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends to use PowerPoint presentation, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits in their oral testimony to be placed on the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Historic Review Board makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond. The issue will be not deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Hold on here. I have more pages. I do. For each public hearing, we state now we will open the record for Oregon City file number. What is the file number on this?
PC 17. Oh, MD-17 or MD-17-01, 02, 03, 04, 05, and 06.
Thank you. Does any commissioner have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statements to declare?
I do not. I don't.
No.
Nor do I. Beyond those stated in the previous hearing, I have been involved in discussions in the neighborhood association. I've been present during those discussions, but I haven't participated in them.
Is there anyone in the audience who wish to question any of the commissioners about these disclosures? Seeing none.
And then also, can you declare if you've been to the site since our last meeting?
I have been to the site as recently as today.
As have I.
I've also been at the site.
And anything
And also been
significant
to the
you've
site.
noticed? Anything of significance you'd like to declare associated with that?
Does anybody have anything else of significance?
Does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the commissioners on the site visit? No.
No, but I don't know if their microphones are on. It's hard to hear.
Hard to hear. All right. So I guess,
They are on. It's a little bit quiet on the other end of the room, so we might have to project a little bit tonight when discussion.
and make sure it's within a couple inches of your mouth, and then you'll get it in the room. Otherwise,
You can
it's
hear
only
it
on
kind of when
the
you get
video.
close. Thank you.
All right, then, we will move forward with the public hearing on this item, starting with the staff report.
Okay, thank you. My name is Trevor Martin, planner with the Oregon City Planning Division, and I don't have as in-depth of a staff report this week. I do have what I presented last week up on the projector behind me. And I may flip to a few things here and there, but mostly what I want to talk about tonight is the purview of the HRB in this application, because there are so many moving parts to this application. That things can tend to be a little bit, why doesn't one thing cover this? Why doesn't one thing cover that? So I just want to talk about the HRB purview and what we're here tonight to do and to look at, because, and also to respond to, I guess, some of the public comments that we received. So the HRB is in charge of looking at the design, focusing on the design guidelines that are put forth by the that are put forth by 1740 and the Oregon City Municipal Code, which references the design guidelines for new construction. And we have this document. It's many pages long. It's available on the city website. But in there, it has a set of, it has a matrix of design criteria, and it kind of has a synopsis of the McLaughlin Conservation District as well as the Kenema National Historic District. And that's what the HRB, I guess, should be looking at, is what's put together in that matrix in the design guidelines for new construction. And that kind of brings us to some of the comments that we heard maybe about, I know we heard some last time about landslide insurance and that kind of information. Well, absolutely relevant to a project in Kenema. Absolutely. I mean, most of Kenema is in a geohazard area. The HRB doesn't really take into account the technical data when dealing with maybe landslides or in Kenema. However, the HRB can look at things like, is moving fill from one area to another, does that work within the neighborhood context? So there's kind of a balancing act that you have to look at there. And that's kind of, I guess, more or less what I wanted to talk about tonight, is that we can address items like that through the design of a site, but we really can't go in depth and look at maybe if a portion of land is sliding or something along those lines. It's really hard to do and actually not possible to do from the Historic Review Board perspective. I guess, did anybody on the board have any maybe questions about that? Was there any confusion on some of those comments that we received? Okay. And I guess if anybody in the audience has questions on that, if you have public comments that you submitted and you want to ask anything maybe related to that, I'd be happy to answer any of the technical and the kind of the balancing act when looking at such items as our geologic hazards and our natural resources overlay district. We can't, while they are important and they will be reviewed in many instances within the Kenema area, they're not reviewed at the design process during the Historic Review Board public hearings. So we kind of have to pull those things out of what it is we're looking at and look at design-based criteria only. So that's mostly what I had to say. And we did receive some comments. I think they are in front of you from the Friends of Kenema nonprofit.
Trevor, I do have a question.
Yes.
And that is, I noticed in part of your staff summary, you titled it Type 3 Review. Now, are there more than one type of review?
Yes, there are. There are 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's different levels of review.
Okay.
So, that kind of brings me, that kind of brings us all around. So what the design review process is a type 3, which means it goes to a public hearing and there's an opportunity for public comment at a public forum to be on camera and kind of have an open discussion back and forth. So that's type 3. Type 4 is like that, but it's at the city commission level, and it's for very specific applications only, such as the comp plan amendment, which we won't do anything like that here.
So anything that comes for a public hearing here would be a type 3 review?
Correct.
Okay.
And then we have the 1 and 2 level reviews. So the type 1 reviews they're our lowest level review, and they're usually over the counter or maybe a couple day review. And it's for things such as facade changes and items like that on commercial buildings. We deal with those mostly, or maybe, and that kind of, I guess that goes into his HRB policies that you have in place. Say if somebody wants to make an alteration to a designated structure, we would, looking at those policies, and if it's spelled out in those policies, such as painting or replacing a window, I can do that through a type 1 level review at staff, but if it's anything like an addition, altering the roof line, I have to bring that to the HRB for a type 3 level review. Then the type 2 level reviews are somewhere in the middle. They have a public comment period, but they don't have a public hearing unless they're appealed. And depending on the type of application, it's appealed to different bodies. But that's where the type 2 level of review for that, which goes out for public comment, that's where your NROD and that's where your geologic hazards overlay is reviewed. So neighbors within 300 feet of the site will be getting a letter in the mail soliciting public comment for any project.
The thing that distinguishes the difference between type 1 through 4 is the level of discretion in the approval criteria. So for example, if the standard is a building could be 10 feet tall, there's not one, but I'm just making one up. And someone reviewing that permit could look at the building, measure the building, make sure it is 10 feet tall and it's non-discretionary, then that's more of a staff level thing. This Historic Review Board application is discretionary, which is why you have a staff recommendation and the decision ultimately by the Historic Review Board. Your decision is appealable to the City Commission by anyone who made comment or has standing in the decision. Also, another thing to note as Trevor was talking about, is this development application will require additional review processes, which are not related to yours. So presumably a site plan design review and any environmental overlay districts that may be needed, which is, I believe, just geologic hazards overlay. So there'll be a separate comment and review process. So the public will have an opportunity to comment on those relevant approval criteria once the applicant submits those and has the necessary studies.
Okay,
And the burden is always ultimately on the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the standards in the code.
Okay.
thank you. The applicant, Chris Staggs, may come forward, and you'll have 15 minutes to tell us how you enjoyed the eclipse or whatever else.
Does it matter which one I use? Okay. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
And if you
You
could
know-
start by just stating your name for the record.
Yeah. My name is Christopher Staggs, and I live at 8903 Southwest Nordic Drive in Portland, Oregon. You know, I'd like to just do an overview of what we're planning on doing on the property. And at this point, we have kind of reiterated everything that we're planning on building here many, many times. And everyone in the room is very knowledgeable about the project and about the plan and all the code references that relate to our project and the process. So in some ways, I feel like it would be a much better use of time rather than going through the proposal again. I'd rather go back and address some of the public comments that were made. And, you know, ultimately, my goal is to compel and convince my neighbors, more than anything, that what we're doing, I think, is good for the neighborhood. Everything that we're proposing is within the guidelines of the underlying zoning, and all the zoning and all the code references that we've been talking about for the past year. And we have through that process made adjustments to our project at whenever it's been suggested that we adjust, we've adjusted in order so that we could be more in compliance and more aligned with the context of Kenema. Because ultimately, the one piece of this that is, I'll say, subjective, is the interpretation of the Kenema historic appropriateness of the development. And we have tried to ensure that everything that we're doing and proposing, based on the comments from the based on the Kenema Neighborhood Association, the many times that we've interacted with that group and that community and shared what we're planning on doing, and in all of our interaction with the HRB over the past year plus or minus, we have adjusted and discussed and come back and address those issues very consistently, I believe. So I'd like to say tonight that we have, and when you look at the staff report, the staff agrees that what we're doing is, the staff is recommending approval of our proposal. And so we've worked closely with them over this period of time too. So rather than explain everything that we're planning on doing again, I'd just like to reemphasize and reiterate that we'd like to build an appropriate small home community in the Kenema neighborhood that we believe, and staff believes, and many of the people of Kenema believe, actually, that this is a very appropriate development for the Kenema neighborhood. If you look back historically at the several hearings that we've had and the public comment, the people that have made the negative comments or the challenging comments and raised those kinds of kind of in opposition of the development are very few when you compare that to the whole neighborhood. So, and you know, I'm not, you know, just getting a little personal here. I'm not the type of person that enjoys or likes to bring up criticism or negative issues and comments about the people that I'm working with in general. I prefer to work collaboratively and to do things in a way that everyone sort of work together to come to a complete whole picture of what something should be. As an architect, that's been my career, is doing that, involved in that process. So I'm very much a collaborator, and was honestly pretty surprised by some of the response and the public comments that were made, because many of them are frankly irrelevant. As Trevor was mentioning earlier, many of the public comments are not relevant to the HRB process. And we have a lot of, you know, we have other steps that we're taking in the next steps of the process with the geotechnical hazard application and with a review and with the site plan review that will be addressing all these other issues and questions related to the geotechnical aspects of the development. So I'd like to suggest tonight that what we're proposing is in alignment with the Kenema context. The planning staff of the city agrees with us and has recommended approval of the project. And I would like tonight to address any questions or issues related to the Historic Review Board aspect of what we're really here for tonight, rather than spend a great deal of time. I know that public comment must be heard, but it would be great if we could focus on kind of really why we're here, is to address the historic appropriateness of our project and of this development. And ultimately, again, I just want to reiterate that I understand the neighbors and their thoughts on where they live and the context of Kenema. Again, I have been involved with many projects myself as an architect where the appropriateness of a building, of a development in the context of a place is hugely important for the appropriate solution, design solution. So Kenema is quirky. Kenema's got a lot of things going on. No curbs, no sidewalks, cars parked wherever, eclectic, historic, underlying zoning. There's a lot of moving parts. But I think ultimately what we proposed in our project from day one, in my first meeting with the city, with the planning staff, was, you know, we talked about all the things we should consider. And we have exhaustively considered. We have 100-page reports and historic. We spent hours walking through Kenema, photographing, measuring, looking, observing, absorbing, understanding Kenema, because that's how we do things. We approach things in a sort of academic way, in that we do research and we want to understand the place. So I thought it was important for me tonight to kind of express these things and say these things, in part because there are two new members of the Historic Review Board. So I want to emphasize and kind of reiterate that what we've done and where we're at today. Of course, I am biased, and I think that our project should be approved, and I think it's wonderful, and I think it works in Kenema. And I hope you do too. I think it really is actually appropriate for the Kenema neighborhood. It relates to the historic quality of the neighborhood, even more so than many of the other homes that are built there in the past 30, 40 years. We're really going back to the roots and basic aspects of what Kenema is all about with these homes. We think that this will be a great addition to Kenema economically. It'll provide homes for 6 wonderful families, people that will add to the vibrancy of the neighborhood, and make Kenema an even greater place to live. So we feel good about that. That's part of what we want to do. Just spend the last few minutes. How much time do I have?
5 minutes. So the
5
counter is
minutes?
right on the other side of your computer or tablet right there.
Oh, okay. So I have 15 total. Is that right? Okay. So I've talked for 10 minutes. Okay. So just lastly, what I'd like to do is briefly touch on some of the. I'm hesitant because I don't want to repeat much. I don't want to repeat a lot of things that I've talked about before. But there were some comments that were made last time that I just want to address, and they were from the Friends of Kenema, and they're numbered from 1 to 12. So I'm just going to go through each one of them briefly, and I'm going to read the comment in verbatim. The first one is there should not be more than one house per each 5,000 square foot lot of record. So there's the underlying zoning and the cottage home development code allow for more than one house of record on each one of those properties. So the code supports our density. And in fact, just to remind everybody, the density that we're proposing on this property is much lower than what the underlying zoning would allow us to build. And furthermore, it's much lower in volume and in size, visual character, than if we were to build, if we took each 4 of these lots, we could build a single family home and an ADU on each one. So we could build 4 rather large homes and an ADU on each one of these lots, but we've chosen to build 6 small cottage homes. So we're taking the lower road, we're taking the lower density. Number 2, there should be standard acceptable setbacks from all bodies of water and right-of-ways and frontages. And our response to that is our site planning of the property is in compliance with city standards. We have done a wetland delineation of the wetland. The DSL has, the Department of State Lands has sent us a letter of recognizing the wetland, and we are planning on building so that we're not touching the wetland. Number 3, all cut and fills that require review, these reviews must happen before any HRB process with approvals by city planning and natural resources committees must be in hand in advance or to advance the project. Our response is the city review process requires review of grading and earth movement during the site plan review and geological hazard. And that's what we'll do next. We're planning on doing that. But it's not a precursor to whether the HRB approves our project or not. I think there's maybe some confusion in the sense that people don't understand what the next steps in the process are of what we're going to be doing. Parking lots are next. Number 4, parking lots are incompatible building guidelines for historic district. The parking is all out of the right of ways, and we're in compliance with the underlying zoning and with the cottage home development parking guidelines. So we're actually making an improvement on Kenema in terms of how parking normally happens, because parking normally in Kenema is very ad hoc, in the right of ways, that sort of thing. So, my time up?
A couple minutes.
Okay.
Minute and a half.
The rest of the comments, I just want to make a statement about them in general, and then I'll end my comments. But generally, in many of the hearings that we've been in, with our previous application and with this current application, there's a lot of comments made that are irrelevant to what we're doing. And we spent a lot of time addressing those irrelevant comments. And I'd just like to point out that in many ways that is kind of contrary to what we're trying to do here. You know, we're trying to actually make some progress and go forward with something. And I think it's important for us to keep in mind sort of why we're here tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members of the public, first up is Patty Webb.
And also, just for my ease, if anyone is speaking on behalf of a neighborhood or an organization, please declare that in your testimony so we can adjust the time.
I will be speaking for Friends of Kenema.
Thank you. All right.
Friends of Kenema believes this entire cottage concept is a violation of the most basic historic building guidelines and will be a detriment to our historic neighborhood. It will be a complete lifestyle change for the surrounding homeowners, will increase flooding to properties downhill, will waterlog and weaken the foot of an active landslide above Kenema and below other homes uphill, literally paving the way for more projects just like it. It is negligent of the HRB to not acknowledge parts of the historic building code which are written and should be enforced for not only stylistic reasons but safety. Yes, it is HRB responsibility to enforce upon this cottage project rules pertaining to inappropriate changes in topography, excess paving and impervious surfaces, and you see the list. Included is a very long list of historic style violations for each house. Not one of these homes resemble a vernacular and do not qualify to be called that. It's unrealistic to expect us to use the time allotted for one home to object to 6, especially with all the violations of the project as a whole. If the project has more violations than can be read in 3 minutes, again, why has it gotten this far along in the process? Yet Mr. Staggs continues to bring the same inappropriate ideas back again and again. These lots have stood vacant for this long for good reasons being ignored now for the sake of commerce. Kenema's original homes were built by the people that would live in them with their families, not just as future rentals or little flip this house investments. They cared about the safety of their families and neighbors. Their morality prevented them from sending floodwaters on to the next neighbor downhill. Unfortunately, we need laws to enforce that now, but we do have them and they are enforceable. It just needs to be done. We expect the same care and respect when building in Kenema today, just like our predecessors 150 years ago. The HRB has means and responsibility to enforce these historic codes and protect us from future developments like this one already planned for Kenema. Many people in Kenema are questioning why this project has been allowed to proceed this far when there are so many violations and objections, especially since Oregon City Public Works had to close Sunset today to clean up a landslide directly uphill from where Mr. Staggs wants to build. So I think calling us fearmongers and irresponsible is what's irresponsible. Digging and building homes in the path of an active landslide is irresponsible. That's why we have rules for the HRB to follow that address topography changes and other historic building guidelines we expect adherence to. It's time to value people's safety over real estate. Please make sure this happens. Thank you, Patty Webb, Friends of Kenema. And then I'm enclosing a list of 30 objections that we have to the individual designs.
Yes, and those are the lists that I handed out to you earlier.
This one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Paul Edgar.
Thank you. Paul Edgar, Kenema. You have a copy of my statement. It also covered with the heading of Friends of Kenema. I want to make a statement up front. The Planning Commission in no way approves or accepts any of the statements said by the applicant because they can't. That's an inferral that shows a statement that is inappropriate. This case is about putting 6 houses in which 5 of the houses are literally on 2 lots. And those 2 lots are now being impacted where 80% of those lots are covered with impervious surface when I define roofs, concrete, and asphalt. As an environmentalist and somebody who cares about wetlands and streams and rivers and stuff, you can't pave over the world. And this is an application to do that. The idea where I would be asking for incentives to allow me to do this is like saying, well, I would otherwise have to build on a wetlands. We know you can't build on a wetland. It's against all code and all logic. But that's what is being presented within this idea that that's the reason why they should have historic preservation incentives to allow them to do this. Now, honestly, is that right? The code tells us it's not right. Also, he infers that a cottage homes overrides historic preservation code. We already heard from the city planning that that's not the case. We have to, this is adjudicated and judged by 1740, period. Not anything else, not any other code out there. That takes precedence over all of the discussion and the considerations that you make. In here, in this document of 4 pages, what I try to spell out is every point right down the line based upon 1740 code and why what he's saying and attempting to do is not appropriate. It violates the basic principles. We hope to hear from you. I know I'm speaking as an individual now because of what we're doing, but I care about Kenema. I'm a historic review board for Clackamas, a member of the Clackamas County. I understand code, and if anybody ever were to come into Kenema and take a look at what I've done with my own personal properties, you will see what I do, and I do it right. Thank you.
Thank you. This one has no name on it. It says Friends of Kenema, period.
Oh, I think that was...
Did you hold it?
That was...
Hold it up.
That was the one that...
Mine.
Okay, yeah, that was the one that Patty had, I think, just read.
Tori Goodwin.
I'm Tori Goodwin. I am the chair of Kenema Neighborhood Association, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the Neighborhood Association. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. This cottage development, I live in the house that, for those of you who don't know who I am, I live in the house that's this development surrounding. And I don't have the schooling, the knowledge, the background to fight this as effectively, or not fight it, but to speak, I guess, in an educative manner on this. It's strictly, unfortunately, my heart and what I can see with my own eyes and what I know Kenema is. And this cottage development, to me, devalues the historical registry of Kenema. The Historical Review Board is in place to protect our neighborhood's historical status. And unfortunately, because I'm not as schooled as planners and historical, people and land use people, I'm relying on you guys. I'm relying on neighbors that might have the knowledge. I'm relying on the city to protect our neighborhood and protect the historical aspect of our neighborhood. And we have guidelines in place that this project is going against. The cottage development is asking us to bend our guidelines. The guidelines you're compromising on, such as setbacks, non-historical architecture, and preservation incentives. Those are rules put in place to protect our historical registry, and we're being asked to compromise on them. And I feel that we need to uphold our guidelines. Mr. Staggs has regularly stated that the density on my property, as an example, to compare to his, and I never see that that's the same. I have one livable building with 4 human beings, a dog and a cat in my area with 2 outbuildings. He's gonna have 3 homes, possibly up to 2 to 4 adults in each one, plus their cars if they have animals. So it's a whole different density issue with the accessories that go along with it, plus the living units are completely different. I only have 1. The architecture is modern. I am not an architect. I don't study architecture, but you can see by the cutout porches on the 2nd floor, all glass. The design is not Kenema at all. It's not historical. It's very modern in, I can say, a non-educated architecture eye. I mean, just driving through, you can see, you know, he continually compares his architecture to homes on other streets. And the guidelines specify, I wrote down the guidelines that the building forms need to relate to the buildings in the immediate neighborhood. If you go from McLaughlin to 3rd to 4th, it's all different. So I don't think we can compare homes that are being built on 4th to homes that are down on McLaughlin or 3rd, because it's a completely different, I mean, you look down the streets and it's just all different. In the general design principles, it states that the appropriate design of a new building is an extremely important consideration for the historic districts. Use of other styles dilutes and distracts from the historical context of this district. Again, this goes back to risking the value of our historical district. And I'm out of time, so I'm done.
Thank you, Tori. Clint Goodwin.
Hi, Janet. I don't think I've met you or talked in front of you. Welcome. Clint Goodwin, Kenema, same house that she was just talking to you about. I have in front of me the Oregon City Historic District's design guidelines. You guys are really familiar, should be familiar with it. This is the guidelines for Kenema District. And some of the guidelines under the 2nd page is characteristics of style. I want to mention some of the things in quote Mr. Staggs: historic appropriateness, and wanting to, quote, build a small, I can't read my own writing, a small community in the Kenema neighborhood. So what you have is someone who wants to build a community within an already community. That doesn't even make sense. First of all, under the characteristic of the style, lots number 2 on that list says right here in your own rules, in our rules that we are to go by, lots range from 50 to 100 square footage or by 100 by 100 square footage and contain a single home. Those are your guidelines. Next, I want to go to character guidelines in this same set of rules. Use of site, under use of site. Down under, let's see, landscaping, paving. Right in paving, it says not allowed patios, courtyards, and parking spaces between the front or side were exposed of the building and the street. As you see, number 4, number 5, and number 2 violate that. Building placement, how buildings are located on the site, is also in your rules. Down below that, it says not allowed irregularly spaced buildings within a regular spaced neighborhood context, or regularly spaced buildings within an irregular spaced neighborhood context. If you look at the building in the corner where I live, completely different than what we're at. Way more buildings, 6 buildings, not regular. Crowded building sites from too large of a building or too small of a lot dimension, houses spaced tightly together, or disrupting the neighborhood rhythm. This disrupts the neighborhood rhythm, you guys. I know you all see it, you all pass it every day, well, most of you do. Spacing that diminishes the historic quality of existing historic resources. That house that I'm in, built in 1867, being surrounded by houses and cottages that have nothing to do with that style. Again, vinyl windows are permittable in Oregon City, but they're not permissible in Kenema. Neither should this be. I don't care if it's permittable in Oregon City, it's not permissible in Kenema according to our own rules. Placement of buildings that diminish the historic resource or neighborhood quality. I also want to say, this has been going on for a year. You guys have given him list after list after list of things to do. He has ignored all of it. From the chalet type windows and porches, he's ignored it. The only thing he's done is because he had to is remove the 7th building. I know, remove the one building because of the setbacks, because it was impossible for him to build that. That's it. Other than that, it's been a big finger to the HRB. Please be aware, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Clint. I have no other comment cards. Nobody's raising their hands. Mr. Staggs, do you have any statements to make in rebuttal? Okay.
I have a question. Will there be a time when I can ask specific questions of Mr. Staggs?
This is it.
Right now? Mm-hmm. And I do have a couple of questions for you.
Okay. State your name again, just for the record.
Yeah, Chris Staggs.
The question I have is, I'm sure you're well aware of what the staff report includes for conditions for approval.
Yes.
Are there any of those conditions of approval that you feel you would not be able to meet?
No.
You could meet all of them, which would include like not having cutouts for the roof?
At the last meeting, we talked about the cutouts of the roof, and I suggested that we didn't really get a chance to elaborate on that discussion, but I suggested that we move them away from the end of the home, but still have a cutout for the upstairs balcony of those units.
Okay, and see, that's the reason I ask, is because I remember you saying that, but the current staff report says that there would be no cutouts.
Does it say that definitively, no cutouts?
On page 38.
So in the findings, it talks about no cutouts, but it's not in the conditions, but it can be made a condition. It can be crafted into any sort of condition. I left it that way more for, I guess, discussion and maybe open to your discretion, how you wanted to address that.
So right now, that one is not exactly a condition of approval that you have listed.
The findings in the staff report indicate that there should be no cutouts. It should have been put on the list of conditions of approval, but it wasn't
At the
carried over
beginning?
to the list, yeah.
Okay, because on page 38 and 42, it specifically says.
So you can, a historic review board can amend this this is your recommendation. So if you want it copied over to the list of conditions of approvals, let us know. If you want it removed, let us know, and we can make those changes before we send out a notice of decision.
Okay, and the additional question that I had that had to do with the staff report has to do with the retaining walls that would be necessary to lower the grade on the front of where house number 1 is.
Yes.
And it states that they can be no higher than 3.5 feet.
Yeah, that is another, I think, clarification that we made at the last hearing. Trevor, if you remember, we talked about that. But essentially what we've done is we've designed the retaining wall on this western property so that where it hits the property line or the right-of-way, and the lower portion of the retaining wall as it goes back into the property would be no more than 3.5 feet high, and then it's stepping, so it would step up to the higher level. But out at the right-of-way and the property line, it would be no more than 3.5 feet high.
Okay.
And that is something we talked about in the last hearing, that the current way that it's written in the staff report suggests that that retaining wall would be no more than 3.5 feet high in its entirety, which is not correct.
Okay, so if you compared the street level to where the top of the retaining wall is at the back, it's 10 feet, but it is not right at that moment. There's not a retaining wall that is 10 feet tall. Is that right?
It's never completely 10 feet tall because we're stepping it. If I can go up to there
Sure.
and show you. So what this drawing is illustrating is a 3.5 foot tall, starting at 3.5 feet here, and then a stepping it's stepping so that it's going along the grade. You can see the natural grade sort of behind here going up. So the idea is that this retaining wall is stepping so that it is never larger than at the base, it's 3.5 feet tall. And you can see here how it's 3.5 feet, 3.5 feet, as it goes back here. This one is probably shown a little higher than 3.5. And then it would go back and then up again. So it's a stepping retaining condition with planting in between.
Okay, so,
Retaining condition.
okay, so
Mitigate that height.
it steps between the lot line and up into the property.
It's all on our property.
Okay, from the lot line, of your lot line, in,
From the interior of our property to the property line.
yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay. The other question I had to do with windows and doors.
Yes.
And there is a picture of a window, or actually is a door that opens like an accordion door. That instead of a sliding glass door, it is one that opens, but it opens up completely from end to end of a room. Is that what you're proposing for the window walls?
Where did you see that?
It was on page 17 of the application, but it was at the bottom of that page in the print, it was actually labeled page 33.
Maybe we can find it here.
I don't believe we're proposing any accordion doors.
Okay.
Can you
Are you
find
talking
them
about maybe
as
something like-
illustrations? I think this is
House 6.
It would be,
I mean, I can say for the record right now, we're not proposing any folding or accordion doors on any of the buildings.
okay. So what kind of doors are you
They'll either be-
proposing that are out of view on the back side of the building where it's more completely windows? What kind of a door are you proposing?
Currently, we're showing sliding doors.
Like a sliding glass door, but with wooden frames?
Yes.
Okay.
That's also been a point of discussion in other meetings where we've talked about the appropriateness of whether it's a swinging door or a sliding door. And in one of the previous meetings, I don't recall which one, we seemed to have consensus that a sliding door was appropriate as long as it had a sufficient frame around it so that basically from the outside it looks like a swinging door. Okay, so it has a wood frame around with the base and the stiles and the top, but it's a sliding wood door. And we've said in previous HRB meetings that all the doors and windows are going to be wood. They're not going to be, sort of the flimsy plastic and metal, aluminum things, doors and windows you'd see in a tract home. We're planning on doing substantial wood frame doors and windows that have the kind of mass and detailing that is appropriate for Kenema.
Okay.
But we don't have
Thank you.
we have no accordion doors or folding doors on any of the exteriors of any of these buildings.
Okay. The
It may have
current
been
staff
something that was
report
shown, yeah.
I read in some place, and I don't know if it's in the original conditions or not, it talked about no sliding doors. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, that was, I believe after after that sentence, it says on the front side of the building. Yeah, I just read that recently as well. Let me see if I can find that for you.
Well, let's see.
And we can amend the staff report
Yeah,
to the
and
wishes of
absolutely.
the board.
Okay.
So just to reiterate on the cutouts.
Yes.
Trevor, would you mind going to one of the plans that show the cutout? Well, you had it a second ago.
Right there.
Right there, okay. So if, I'm just going to point out, well, my suggestion the last time was that rather than have this cutout on the end of the home, so when you're looking at the end of the home from inside the property, I'm suggesting instead of having that cutout there, this would be a kind of regular facade. Right, just like the one up there, a regular
Right.
sort of mass with windows punched in it. And this is the elevation of, that's that elevation. So instead of this cutout being here, we would move it over so that there would be a roof element here coming down, and we would still have the area for a balcony at the second level. But again, these are only proposed in areas that are not facing the public right of way.
Mm-hmm.
We think it's important for natural light in the home, just to get that cutout in there, to have more natural light in the homes. And if you look at, I don't have it right in front of me, but we did a fairly exhaustive study of Kenema in terms of the historic, what's there now.
Yes.
And it's very eclectic, and it's very much, you see a lot of variety in roof forms and windows. The house right next door to us, to the west, has a very large wall of windows facing our property. So I think there's, within the Kenema neighborhood context and design sensibility, and what makes Kenema Kenema is that it has this sort of ability to kind of move around a little bit. It isn't like one thing everywhere. It's very irregular and kind of eclectic, which I think is the beauty of Kenema. It has that kind of flexibility. And going, and if you look at the guidelines, it talks about we don't want people to just repeat everything, the same thing everywhere, but within a kind of framework, do something that matches and kind of feels like it belongs in Kenema, which can be a kind of subjective thing, unfortunately. But
and I just had to, I found what you were, board member or man, I found what you were talking about, and we can make any changes to those conditions. It's in the conditions, but yeah, it does say sliding doors are not permitted on any portions of the house, but it's up to you if that stays or if you want to change that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions before you leave? Any other?
Yeah, in your submittal, you talk about the vernacular, which is as simple. I look at these and I still cannot see vernacular. I see what I've referred to before as chalet. And doing a cutout in the middle as opposed to on the end, it still has that chalet look. And I can't remember if we address the, it's not on this one, but on one or on another, there, that one up the top left with the floor to ceiling windows. And I do believe, that also is not vernacular in any way, manner, shape, or form. And is this where they're referring to the sliding doors up in the upper right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of it.
I thought that at the last, we've had a few, so I'm confused as to which one, where it was discussed, but I believe we said no sliding doors, they would be French doors.
We can do that. If that's the board's decision on doors, then we can go with sliders and we can go with swinging doors.
Okay. And, somewhere, it's hard because there's so much documentation, and I should have highlighted some of it, but there was a statement in there that Oregon City has never had a cottage village. Any type of new idea has its pros and cons. And people have to kind of wrap their mind around it. I think this village, Cottage Village, would be great in other parts of Oregon City. I still have troubles with it being in our only National Historic District. And I know that, you know, we have in the past with other new construction allowed some variance and leeway in as far as areas that are not seen by the public. However, that's on one house. This is on 6 houses. So it makes so much more of an impact and it's much more of an impact. And so and also the placing, if you can go to the placing.
Is there a question in there?
Well, these are just. Huh?
We will go into that.
Yeah, we will. All right. Sorry. I'm just, you know, had notes and stuff, but I guess there is no question in there. But other than your interpretation of vernacular, and I know vernacular means a style common to a certain locality, but a lot of this isn't. So anyway.
Could I just say one response? I think it's important, and in reading the historic guidelines for the city of Oregon City, in the very beginning pages, it talks about, and I don't have it, you know, I'm paraphrasing. I don't have it right in front of me, but it talks about new development. Not regurgitating, and it probably is a different word there, but we're not regurgitating the past, the history. We're working with the history. And over the past century, there's been various responses and interpretations to that historic context that's been there. Some good and some maybe not so good. But the current city guidelines talk about that in the very beginning, where it talks about working with and not doing exactly what.
Not recreating.
We're not recreating the history.
Right.
So I think that leaves a lot of that lets us have more flexibility.
Okay, no further questions.
Sorry, I didn't.
Thank you.
Okay.
We will now move on to deliberation and discussion among the board members,
You want to close the public?
and we will close the public hearing for that.
I am ready to make a motion, and I want to say up front, though, that I would be making a motion in favor of approval with conditions, and then we could discuss it. But I would require, somebody else would have to approve my motion, realizing that they didn't have to vote for the final thing after the discussion.
I think it's a little premature to make a motion before every board member's had an opportunity to comment.
Well, and that's one of the things I thought, this would give you a platform to talk about it. By having a motion on the floor.
Is there a second to the motion?
Well, I have to make the motion first, but I don't know if any,
So typically you would go through and everyone would just say their deliberations and
Yes.
then you would do a motion afterwards.
that's fine.
Why don't we go that way? We have a staff report here that's 50-some pages long, but I would like to follow through it kind of in the order that it's presented, step by step, because it's very thorough and very logical in its organization. It starts with the specific conditions of approval for each of the houses in an effort to address the concerns that have been expressed throughout the hearings regarding the designs on these houses. So I don't know if you have a copy of the revised, okay, is that revised August 15th?
Yes.
That's the one you're after. And I'm on page 2. Which states the conditions of approval for house number 1. Retaining and structural walls shall be minimized, shall be faced and finished with stone, mortared basalt or concrete, and not exceed 3.5 to complement the Kenema neighborhood. B, concrete foundations shall have natural parged or paint finish. C, exposed foundations shall be site screened with vegetation if concrete or masonry exceeds 3.5 feet, or if pilings or posts are 1.5 feet above grade. D, a minimum of 5 shrubs and ground covers shall be installed along the facade of the front porch. Roofing shall use traditional materials such as wood shingles, composition, and metal shingles. Skylights shall be installed in inconspicuous roof slopes, and skylights shall be mounted close to the roof plane and not visible from the right-of-way. I should point out that the illustrations that we see on the board were made before these conditions of approval were written, so we don't expect to see those in the drawings.
Correct.
Yes, and if it's helpful for the board, Trevor also has a list of the issues that were brought up during tonight's hearing as well,
Yeah, so
for all of the homes collectively.
jump back and forth.
So I would ask any board members if they have any additional conditions that they would add to that list, or if they want to delete any of the conditions that are listed. And I don't know if we can bring this document up on the screen or not.
So as mentioned in previous meetings, the siting of House 1 is below the natural slope off of 4th Avenue. So it's lower than the houses bordering it on either side.
It's
Appropriate siting, in my opinion, would be that the elevation be equal to the 2 houses adjacent to it.
I hit this back one time too many. Sorry.
That's okay. There, notice.
Oh, there.
Q-slip. House 1.
To my way of thinking, I don't see how you're going to get up to it unless there is some way that you go from the lower level up. Even if you put the first house up on top, you would still have to have a driveway going up. So
Yes,
you would have to have a retaining wall, basically.
No, I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. The other houses, the existing design as it is requires cutting deeply into that slope to be able to site that house that low, so removing a significant amount of earth from that spot. In my opinion, the appropriate siting would be to move, I'm looking at page 6 of the staff report, would be to move that house back such that it's in line with the 2 houses adjacent. So you can see based on the contrast on the topography on the layout there is not very visible on the projected screen, but on the report on the iPads it's easier to see. Roughly the 2 houses adjacent follow the similar topography line within a few feet. That would be the natural context and siting for the house that would follow the existing kind of lay of the land.
I am looking on page 10. We have some elevation drawings that show, put the elevation of that house in context. The third drawing down shows the neighboring houses on either side. And the way it appears here, and I may be misinterpreting what I'm looking at, but it appears that at curbside and in the front yard of this first house, there really is not a significant amount of cutting, that the cutting takes place behind the floor level of that first house, that most of the cutting is behind the house to accommodate the parking area.
I think the top one shows, because the dotted line that goes up through the windows is actually where the land was. So it is actually a cut down. And it shows that it's lower than the houses to the...
Yep, you were right.
To the west of them. I happen to think, though, that it is more balanced the way it's rendered on the drawings. And I'm not too concerned about it being lower or further in front than the houses on either side of it, because it means that it's not so much of a cookie cutter approach, which the rest of Kenema is not either, because there are varied setbacks all along the street.
So what I'm hearing is that we all agree with the conditions of approval that are listed on the staff report and would consider addressing one additional condition relating to the elevation of the house. Is that what
Yes, in addition, I'm not inclined to grant any preservation incentives on that house. So there would be a 5-foot setback issue on that house as well.
Then you wouldn't have room for a driveway.
Oh, yes.
Then how are you ever going to gain entrance to that lot?
Well, my job is not to do the developer's job for him. It's to say what the guidelines call for.
Okay.
Okay. I do feel that the first one does not accurately reflect where it says there can be no retaining or structural walls to exceed 3.5 feet. It needs to take into account the stepped portion of it, so that would need to be amended. Where house 1, retaining and structural walls shall be minimized to be faced or finished in stone, which is fine, but it says, and not to exceed 3.5 feet.
My understanding of that is that the terracing as proposed now does conform with that
Correct.
condition.
Yeah, so what
Depends on interpretation. That's what I'm wondering, because when I read it, I think that means it can't be any more than 3.5 feet.
So I think what we would add to that to make it a little bit more concise would be in the front of the home, so not exceed 3.5 feet in the front of the home. You can say something 3.5 feet from grade in the front of the home. So that would mean following the grade up.
That would be acceptable.
Okay. So if you agree or something like that.
So read how,
Okay. Sorry about that. So there is another part of retaining walls that's not in here, but we can make this change, and it's in the city code, but not in this portion of it. But we do have, our code does say about anytime a retaining wall goes 3.5 feet up, it needs to be spaced out 2 feet. 3.5 feet up, spaced out 2 feet. So it has to have a certain spacing to it, which would be something that we would add here, would probably want to add here as well. And
In other words, the 3.5-foot height happens a few different places in our code. It also happens in a world outside of historic review board review. So you can step things, but you have to have spaces between a horizontal distance between 3.5-foot retaining walls, and that's 2 feet in the other world. So I don't know if you want to specify a horizontal distance in your world. Or, if you have it goes up 3.5 feet, then back 2 feet, then up 3.5 feet, is that okay, right?
Yeah.
Or is it not?
And to me,
because of the mass
as long as it said stepped, it would be sufficient, because I'm not an engineer, and I'm sure that, and they would be reviewing that at another level about exactly what criteria it had to meet for the steps. Is that right?
Yeah, so I just, from the historic review board perspective,
Yeah.
are you okay with the step if there's space between those steps? And is there a minimum distance you want between those steps to be contextually appropriate in Kenema? Right, this just says 3.5 feet.
Yeah, for me, it doesn't matter, but it may for others.
Yeah, with that clarification then.
okay, so it'd be, to reiterate, so it'd be should not exceed 3.5 feet from grade in the front of the house, and then and within a step spacing, a minimum of 2 feet from step to step. Something I'd wordcraft a little bit cleaner than that.
We will come back to these conditions. We'll look at 2 and 3. The conditions of approval stated for both of those houses are the same. And D through G are also the same as D through G in house number 1, so we presume that they're equally acceptable for these 2. The 3 that are different. A, primary residential doors shall complement the design and detailing of the historic style with similar appearance to wood. Doors shall be designed in a style and rail type panel design with upper portion glass. The primary door may be a solid panel door. Sliding doors are not permitted. B, gable roofs shall have equal pitch. Gable primary roof shall have a pitch of 812 or greater, 612 if it's a bungalow. The porch or bay roofs may have lower slope, may have hip if the style allows, and roofs may have a minimum, shall have a minimum 1 foot overhang with a maximum of 3 feet. And C, windows shall match the member sizing, thickness, and shadow lines of painted wood windows. Windows shall consist of the following designs: double or single hung or casement. Wood clad shall be matching in color and finish. Non-wood fiberglass or aluminum windows are acceptable if in appropriate style, and matching wood in profile shadow line, and if similar in color and finish. If a non-wood style is proposed, a sample is required. Now, since the applicant has already told us that he's going to do all wood windows, we could simplify that one greatly by just saying wood windows.
Yeah, okay.
What is not mentioned here are the roof cutouts.
Can we go back to the windows
Sure.
for a moment? On one of the, well, and on the skylight also, on number 2, the skylights are showing on the, I would say, north side of, I'm looking at the overall one that shows the Cassidy house, that one. The skylights are on the right side, which would be visible from Miller, is it Miller?
Yeah, Miller.
Yeah.
No.
From Fourth.
No, it wouldn't be.
That's Miller's up this way, right?
Miller.
No,
Yeah.
Miller's over there.
Miller's, okay. So they would be visible from Miller
Not
Street
with
when
the
you drive in.
The big
Not where the
trees.
existing trees are.
But there's,
Yeah, I've checked out the site. They would be visible, in my
they
opinion.
would be, I think they'd be visible, you know. Number 3, they're obviously, you know, on the backside, but number 2, the skylights, in my opinion, should be on the other side of the slope of the roof.
That would be,
Because there are trees there, but are they deciduous? I mean, during the winter.
These are fir trees.
They're fir trees.
Okay, that's right, they are. That's right, it's fir. And then as far as the windows, and I can't remember which house it is that has the chalet.
This is one of them. 'Cause
One
it
of them.
has them here.
Right, no, there's another one.
This isn't the main, but we're on
Right.
2 right now.
Where,
so.
and it talks about wood framed windows, and there's the one cottage that has the,
The gable windows.
yeah,
that-
right, and those are definitely not, and I, that's one thing, and I'm not, let me figure out which one it is.
So on
I
this,
think it's 4, 5, and 6,
sticking-
3.
in
Okay,
a-
so we
well,
can cover that one when we
sticking to
get there.
2 specifically at
Okay.
this time, looking at the gable end, it appears, I can't tell if that's a solid surface or if that's windows. Regardless, I think we can make the statement that, or I would make the statement that
Okay.
any non-rectangular windows are not appropriate. In addition, into the side, where that cutout is, there's additional large windows above the door height slider there.
Right,
As a blanket condition that would apply to all the houses, I would say that the windows on the second story should not exceed a door height plus a transom. And they should be rectangular only.
and wood.
Are you writing that down? We had this discussion in an earlier hearing, and we were in substantial agreement on that point, that rectangular windows were far more appropriate.
And when I say a transom, I mean in proportion to the door, so roughly 12-inch type of, in addition to the door height, 7-foot
not
door
with the
height
cutout.
type of thing. Right, and then on the architectural side, on number 2, I don't feel that we've been given any justification for why a cutout of this nature would be appropriate for a vernacular style house. And I would add as a blanket condition for all the homes that all the cutouts be removed completely.
I feel that it is an adaptation of the vernacular style, and if it is not visible from the road, which, as it's drawn right here, house 2, the cutout is visible from the road. But if it was moved back so that it was solid facing 4th Street, then it would be okay. And it would give more light in the house and more visual feeling of being outdoors when you're inside the house. So I guess I'd be more in favor of saying the cutouts cannot be visible from either street. From either 4th or from Miller. And it affects just 2 houses, 2 and 3. 3 may not be visible because there's other houses in the way, the cutout.
Can the board, if the board chooses to go this direction, can you provide more clarity as staff when we're looking at these? How do we know if it's visible? In other words, can you just pick the ones and say where it's okay or not, or how far in you want it from the side? Just so we're all crystal clear on how to implement that condition of approval? I just want clear guidance from the board.
You want,
I'm with you, Nova.
okay,
It's hard for us to say if it's visible or not when we're reviewing it to see their plans, if they comply with the conditions of approval. So if you don't want one, just say you don't want it. If you want it in 5 feet or whatever the number is, just say that, and then we can implement that. We want to try and do conditions of approval that don't have discretion so that we're all on the same page about our expectations.
I would like to see on the conditions that there be no roof cutouts. That's just my,
Yeah, I agree. And I would also just remind everyone that the applicant has stated that he wants to preserve the wetland for the benefit of the public, including the right-of-way access to the wetland, in which case, from any direction, the cutouts would be visible. So I really can't find any justification for deviating from the design guidelines. It was not included in the application, and I haven't heard any testimony as to why that would be a appropriate architectural modification.
Will you make that note as a possible condition of approval that we will vote on when we get to that point?
Correct. Yes, I can do that.
Nothing else on 2 and 3 then? Again, on number 4, paragraph B can be abbreviated down to wood windows, rectangular in configuration. And D through G are again the same on all of the houses. C deals with the doors in the same way. But I believe house 4 is the one with the sliders, and this condition does stipulate that sliders are not permitted on any portion of the house. Even though we did have that discussion, Derek Metzen felt that the new sliders could be appropriate, but Mr. Staggs has said that French doors would be equally acceptable from his standpoint, and I think that they would be more acceptable from a design compatibility standpoint.
I would agree that in my time, we've never allowed sliding doors,
Yeah.
and French doors would be most appropriate.
So the only other condition of approval on house 4 that's different from the others is A, the main entrance to the house shall not be oriented toward the adjacent parking lot. And
what
I
is,
believe that was,
what is the reasoning for that? That the house front isn't oriented towards the parking?
I'm sorry, which, I didn't catch the first part of that.
we're on paragraph A on house 4, condition A.
Oh, yeah, there was maybe some confusion in my part, kind of determining where the front door may have been, just in the overall design. So to just avoid that confusion and any further development, I just had it so it would not be facing the parking lot. Because if we go back to house,
So it will not face Miller Street?
Well, the parking lot would be located here, so I
Right.
think ideally the front door would be over here, possibly, or maybe over here. Correct, yes.
Okay.
Is that something to make it consistent with the Kenema neighborhood? I'm confused.
It's part of the design guidelines. Just has no public, or no, there's something in there, I forget where it says, but no home exiting into a parking lot or something, or entering off of a parking lot or something like that.
And the same condition is stated for house number 5.
Well, and for 4, if you could show the side views of that one.
Oh, sorry.
Oops.
Um,
3, 4. And we haven't addressed the floor to ceiling glass in any of these unless I'm reading it wrong.
Yeah, that should be encompassed, incorporated into the discussion of windows.
Yeah, that they need to be just like French doors, and then, but without the glass all the way to the peak. So it'd be filled in above, perhaps with just a.
Yeah, the same condition I would apply to all.
Right.
At minimum is that
Right.
it's a door height plus
And then
a
a transom.
transom would be the maximum.
But with the whole, on that upper level, would that be all the way across?
That one isn't. Some of them are, but that one is not, because there is a window over on the right-hand side right there.
Yeah, it's
That's a solid wall.
siding on this.
Oh.
It sounds like you're looking to amend the condition to not only state that those second-story windows can't exceed the door height plus a transom, which is generally around a foot, plus are rectangular in shape. So it sounds like you're interested in that triangle piece where it goes to the edge of the wall,
Right.
Correct.
or square rectangular.
Here we go. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not clear where we ended up regarding the placement of the front doors. The entrance facing shall not be oriented toward the adjacent parking lot, and that applies to 5 and 6.
Correct, yes.
4, I think it is facing, way it is rendered, it is facing a parking area.
Yes,
5,
4
I
and
don't
5.
believe it is.
4 and 5.
Right.
I don't think it is, so for 5. It is facing the street.
Yeah, it looks like it for 5. So yeah, 5 could probably be omitted if you wanted to, but for 4, we could keep it in.
So that
Okay.
means it would be,
We can leave it in as a condition of approval.
so somewhere has to
already-
be the front. So that means that for 4, the front is facing the wetland and the back would be facing.
Right.
Because
No.
there's some stalls right there where the pointer is. There's some tandem stalls. Are we considering that parking lot? I'm just just want to clarify. Can the front face the Cassidy house? Are you saying that it has to face the wetland?
Wetlands.
I don't think the front door was on that, it was on the south side. I think it was originally on the
I think it was
What's the north?
west side.
That's,
Oh, okay.
That's, huh?
Can you go to the design of lot 4?
Wait a minute.
House 4.
so.
This
I
is
was
4 or
going off,
5?
so it's got 2 large space skylights. 2 small space
I'm
skylights.
not
I thought
sure
I was doing it.
which way you're talking about.
The large ones are
As
facing the
west.
Cassidy house.
So that's the Cassidy.
So this would be facing the Cassidy
Cassidy
house.
house. Right.
This
This would be facing
and
the
this is
wetlands.
north,
So the front is facing the Cassidy
west,
house.
and this is east.
It kind of has the parking lot on 2 sides.
Yeah.
So can it face the parking lot in that case? Otherwise it's
North is toward the river.
backwards.
Right.
North is toward the river?
North is toward the
Technically.
river.
I guess it would be. You're right.
Yeah.
So it would be the north side. And the doorway is not on the north, right?
The front door?
For house 4, I think the front door was originally on the east.
So there's the narrow side, which
The
is
narrow
facing,
side east frontage is in the lower right corner.
All right, yeah.
which is facing a parking lot.
Correct.
Yeah.
The condition says you can't face the parking lot.
Facing
does that mean for the
the
house?
north or towards the Cassidy house is also a parking lot. Because there's 2 parking spots
So
there.
then it needs to be on this.
So the 2 sides
side?
that remain are the left and the bottom, which are the west and the south.
So does the entry, the condition of approval is saying that the entry for lot 4 needs to be facing south, towards the wetland, or towards house 3?
Number 3.
Yeah, I don't think either of those are realistic, though.
You don't think they're what?
Realistic, really.
Realistic?
How would you deal with it?
Yeah, I'm wondering,
Is there mitigation and any appropriateness?
Yeah, because there's parking
Can
here.
it be,
Yeah,
can number
'cause they're
4
on the
be
other side.
situated closer to 3?
What's that?
So that it steps back away from the,
House 4 is all windows.
No, because of the configuration of the wetland, it can't move that direction.
oh, okay.
Yeah, so if house 4 were facing the parking lot, it would be this windowed portion, which would be abutting the parking lot, which might be a little weird.
Would. Trevor, can you tell us again what the code is that led to that?
I don't have the exact language on me, but it's something to the effect of the primary entrance shall not be facing a parking lot or shall not be abutting a parking lot or something to those lines. I think it's in the parking section underneath the design guidelines, and I can maybe try and find it here if you, and come back, we can come back to it in just a second.
We'll find it if you guys want to move on.
Okay, we will let that one sit for a minute and go to house number 6.
5?
5. And all of the conditions of approval stated here have already been covered on the previous ones.
The main entrance of the house, I believe with the way it's pictured, it already meets the first condition, so it
Correct.
doesn't hurt to leave it in or take it off.
And I see on house number 6 that all of the conditions stated for that have already been discussed in the others as well. So we really have just a small number of issues.
I can summarize the issues for you if you like. I'm not sure if there's consensus on all of them, but I'll summarize them. I'll do our best. So generally, regarding the conditions of approval that could apply to all of the units was clarifying the condition on windows and just requiring wood windows. A condition that there be no sliding doors and that there be French doors, although there may have been a split between the board on if that's all the way around or only on facing towards the wetland. Then the condition that the second-story windows not exceed door height plus a transom of about 12 inches and that the windows are rectangular or square in shape. A condition that there are no cutouts. And again, there seem to maybe not be a consensus, or maybe there is, on if that applies to all elevations of the building or not. A condition about the retaining wall, so clarifying the horizontal distance of 2 feet before you can step up 3.5 feet in front of the structures. On lot 1, the specific concern was for a side yard setback adjacent to the Cassidy house. Lot 2, it was skylights not facing Miller Street. And we're double checking on the entrance for number 4, not lot 4, but home 4.
Okay.
I mean, you said cutout. I don't know if you have the word roof cutout.
Roof cutout, okay. We understand where we're going, so we can
Okay,
craft
okay.
things after, as
Okay.
long as you know,
Okay.
as long as we understand the context. So roof cutouts, thank you.
I want to address the concerns that have been raised by the public tonight and in prior meetings. The staff has done so in great detail over many pages of the staff report that we're looking at tonight, revised August 15th. And point by point, it addresses each of the concerns raised in the prior submissions from the Friends of Kenema. And also on page, starting on page 17 of the staff report, it addresses the concerns that are stated on the August 22nd Friends of Kenema submission.
There's one additional issue that I'd like to mention specifically, and that's the vertical siding on a number of the houses. It's difficult to ascertain from the renderings, but it's very narrow in several of these, and it gives a more modern feel, particularly, so kind of like what you're seeing there in the upper right, and that's spread out on a number of the sides of a number of the houses. Generally, from the renderings, it's difficult to tell what the actual.
So you would like to add a condition that the siding be of some horizontal?
Lappers.
To me, that seems most appropriate for the style. I'm not necessarily opposed to all forms of vertical siding, but what I see on the rendering is more modern than what I would normally think is appropriate.
Just request that it be horizontal. Correct?
That would be one way that I would find
It-
acceptable.
You know, it looks to me like you're trying to make it exactly a vernacular house. And I don't think that the design guidelines require that.
They do not.
And as a result, I don't feel that having vertical siding on the areas next to the wetlands is a problem. And that's the only place they are, and they were clearly delineated in the renderings that were submitted by the architect.
That's not true.
Yes, it is.
There's a number of sides of the houses that have vertical siding, some that are exposed to the street.
No, they aren't exposed to the street. They're marked in green on one of the pictures or drawings about where all the vertical siding was.
So I see vertical siding exposed to the street on house 4, on house 5, and on house 6, clearly, and that's just looking in the black and white.
Is it a small amount next to the front door?
Yeah, it's let's see. On house 6, it's all the inset portion on the front, which is the entryway portion.
Okay, which one are you,
On
is it one of them that's up above there?
Let's find 6. Still, here's 6. Can't tell from this print.
The board
But-
could limit vertical siding to the facades not facing a street or neighboring properties or something like that. I mean, however you want to craft that for appropriateness.
Well, that's the way I feel that is appropriate, is not facing the streets.
Okay.
But I don't feel that it does now.
Well, if we write it as a condition, then we'll make sure that it doesn't.
Okay.
Okay, and, may I just butt in here for a quick second? So that portion of what I was was trying to get to on item number, or house number 4 and number 5. So in the design guidelines, it talks about driveways, and I guess that's kind of open to interpretation a bit, but then it says oversized driveways. What's not allowed, oversized driveways are located in the front of the main facade of the home. So I was taking that front entrance was the main facade, and then that driveway should not be there, or else either the house or the house should.
That is the way I originally interpreted it. I pictured a single house where you had a big driveway that was taking up the whole front yard and going across in front of the house. And the acceptable way was to have the driveway go along beside the house, not in front of it.
Correct.
In this sort of an adaptation, I'm not sure it's an issue. I don't know, it may not be an issue for the architect to adjust it slightly, but visually, I don't think it's an issue. It's not quite the same thing.
I tend to agree. So Trevor, you got the condition regarding vertical siding. We want,
Yes, so it will not be facing, not be visible from the right-of-way.
Facing the
Okay.
street.
Facing the street, yeah.
so staff did a really good job of addressing all of the points page by page. And there's about 30 pages worth here, so I'm not even going to begin to read them all. The conditions of approval address all of the concerns stated. Until we get clear back to the discussions on page 51. And there are 2 concerns mentioned there that staff did not provide an answer for, and they are asking us to have these discussions.
Would it be?
Dead center in the page, paragraph number 4 deals with parking lots, and the public input has been parking lots are incompatible with building guidelines for historic districts. The HRB has the obligation to evaluate the contextual design appropriateness of a parking lot feature within the area the applicant has proposed to develop. So I walked Kenema today and counted 15 parking lots.
Can you tell us a little bit more about our walk, and so we can ask for the declaration?
I walked the entire historic district and listed all of the parking lots that exist. 8 of the 15 are on residential properties and 7 are on commercial properties, mostly down on McLaughlin. But there are parking lots on properties on 5th, 4th, 3rd, McLaughlin, Apperson, maybe others.
Since this is new information which may be influencing your decision, I would request you open back up the public hearing and then allow the public to ask you questions regarding this.
Okay.
About the one item, about parking lots and
It's a
specifically?
little bit of ex parte context. We just want to make sure that we're disclosing everything in our mind that's going into this decision-making, so it's open to the public and that they can question us to understand that.
We will open the public hearing. Does anyone have any comments regarding parking lots in Kenema? Paul? And again, for the record, state your name.
Again, I'm Paul Edgar, Kenema. I too have walked the area all the time, and I do it on a regular basis. There are no real parking lots in the upper half of Kenema that are associated with, that are not associated with a building separate. So if I have a garage, and my garage is out there and I've got a trailer parked in front of it, but that's legal because it's a garage and it's not on it is on a gravel surface right in front of the garage doors. But yet at the same time, all I can turn around and say is there Fifth Avenue, unimproved Fifth Avenue going along the side onto the side of the uphill side where the wetlands is, that is also a view area where I cannot put horizontal siding on it because it's considered the front of the house. And so when we have the driveway along the Cassidy house.
We're talking about parking lots.
Yeah, but this is all part of the same picture. It is what is the right-of-ways that we're actually talking about. And we have a right-of-way, there is not a right-of-way between this property and the Cassidy property that is there, other than it's going to be a common area, I guess, going into the parking lot. And there is no example of that that I know of. If Mr. Chair Basinger knows of one that he can reference to us exactly, we'd like to hear it because I think it's important. I don't know of other cases in the hillside area where we have that.
I know of one beside Mark Perch's house. There's a parking lot there. There's like 1, 2. Do you know where Mark Perch lives?
No.
Oh, it's on, I'm terrible with the streets down there.
3rd Avenue?
I think it's 3rd. 3rd. If you go up to, excuse me, where you walk down to go to the, along the promenade there, there's a little park there at the end of that street.
Old Kenema Park?
Yeah.
So he has a parking area.
I want to make sure that if there's any public comments that we get them on the record.
Okay.
Sorry. And can you say your name for the record?
Clint Goodwin, Kenema. Any parking lots that are there now, I'm wondering what the board is, I'm wondering, Ken, what you're defining as a parking lot, because my driveway can fit 4 or 5 cars. Does that make that my driveway a parking lot? Just because my driveway can hold that many cars doesn't make it a parking lot. The area that you're concerned or bringing up, Claire, was this guy's space that he uses as a parking area. Same thing on 4th Avenue, Scott's house. Gravel area, they put the fence around. He has what, I don't know if you're trying to call that a parking lot, but that's his property where he parks his vehicles because he doesn't have a garage. He doesn't have a driveway. That's not a parking lot. Now, what he's putting up here, you could see plainly, there's delineal lines. I'm imagining they're painted. and delineated,
Okay.
that's a parking lot. I would imagine there's even curb stops to prevent cars going into the residence.
What you're suggesting is that...
There are no parking lots other than the new Kenema Park and the old Kenema
The
Park.
definition that you're providing is that if it
Delineated
has stripes, it's a parking lot. If it
stripes
doesn't
and
have
the-
stripes, it's not.
Stripes and 9, I think we're at 9 or 11, I don't know where, I don't see it on that, but 9 parking
9.
stalls is what we're looking at versus someone's area where they park in front of their home or a driveway that can fit 4 cars. You're trying to make, it's apples and oranges. That's my comment.
Well-
That's where I live, and that's the truth
Okay.
of the matter.
Your driveway did not appear on this list.
I know, but why not?
But-
Why not? It could fit
Well-
6 cars. Then why not make it a driveway?
It's a driveway.
Or a parking lot? Why is it a parking lot?
It is a driveway.
But I park cars there, so why isn't it a parking
And
lot?
Chair Basinger,
I'm not sure the
I'm not trying to-
argument.
can I interrupt real quick? Chair Basinger, you have a list in front of you. Would you like to enter that into the record?
Sure.
But also maybe with a definition of what you were considering a parking lot.
Yes, I would love to know the
Yeah.
definition.
The difference between a parking lot and a driveway, I wrote down the ones that were, whether they were gravelled or paved. They are oversized parking areas that are open for multiple vehicles and in excess of, I think the minimum I said was 4.
So may I ask,
Perhaps it would be appropriate if
May I
we
ask-
could pass this around the audience so they can
Sure.
understand what you're
may I ask Ken, was Scott's home, and I don't know his address on 4th, considered one of the parking lots with the gravel?
It is.
Okay, that parking area is for one livable home, one resident.
Yes.
This is for 6. That's the difference between a parking area for someone's home that doesn't have a garage, doesn't have a driveway, so part of their property, they've made into a gravel area where they could park their vehicle safely, and if their car drips oil, the gravel's there to stop it and catch it.
Yeah.
This is a parking lot that you would see in an apartment complex, a shopping mall, something like that. This, not that it's huge, but it is big enough to be different.
You can
than one living-
identify which ones on that list do or don't meet your criteria, and some of them probably won't. Yeah, Scott's would be one of them that you don't feel is a parking lot.
Well, I haven't memorized the
but-
addresses in my neighborhood, so for me to define these would be really difficult without seeing a map and maybe an aerial view and say, okay, I remember that one. But I would say that if you're going by an area that can hold more than 3 cars, then my lot, my driveway, should by all means, by this board, be considered a parking lot.
The
So
point,
for you to name anyone else's driveway or their
Yeah.
parking area for their single-family home a parking lot is saying that it's the same as this multi-unit parking area, designated parking area. You got to remember, none of these residents own that property. They only own the sticks on top of that property. He owns the property. They're paying dues and an HOA. This is a homeowners association.
I think
What
you're
we're
assuming
talking
things
about-
not in
what-
evidence.
No, it is. It is. It's already been determined. I know you're late in the game, but it's already been there.
what we're talking about is design and aesthetics, not...
This is nowhere in except at the park.
Hey, Chair
I'm
Basinger.
saying that the appearance of these parking lots is no different from the appearance of those parking lots.
True. Not true at all.
I would recommend if you want to just say your spiel and then
That
have
was
for
it.
public
My
comments.
spiel
and
has
then-
been said.
You know what so then people can respond to everything that's going into your decision making.
Any other questions from me? In my opinion.
I thought you were asking me questions.
No, I was, they had asked me something earlier. You good?
Patty?
I'm in agreement with Clint that
And can you say your name for the
my
record,
name's
please?
Patty Webb. I live at 310 3rd Avenue. There's an easement between a lot of the houses in Kenema. My neighbor has decided that's his parking spot and no one else is allowed to park there. That does not make it a parking lot. Like he said, my house, I can fit 2 cars, that's all, in my driveway. It's not a parking lot. There are businesses, because certain areas, especially down in McLaughlin, are mixed use with businesses. When you come home to your driveway, you don't expect to find a neighbor sitting there parked in your parking spot because it's not a parking lot, it's your property. That's different from this. And I will take a look at this list, and I think it's very unfair for you to go on your own to try to support this idea when we say that we do not allow parking lots, and parking lots are not appropriate to our historic district because there are parking lots for commercial businesses. These houses were made by very large families, some of them extended families that have different cars they drive to work, and they share parking spots at their homes. That does not make them parking lots.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Howard.
I think we're missing, I'm Howard Post, I live in Kenema. We're talking about 6 houses, 1.5 cars per house. Most houses have 2 cars. So if you're dealing with 9 spots, where do the other cars go? Should there be more than that? They're going to park on the street or off the street or elsewhere. You only got 9 spots. How do you deal with the rest?
You have a question for me?
Well, my question is, yes, you have 9 parking spots probably for 12 cars. Where do the rest go?
I don't have that answer.
Well, I know, I said, I don't, I'm throwing this at you.
Okay.
So I do have a couple comments on the list, so I only saw it very briefly.
Or you want to close or allow?
Yeah, we'll close the public hearing at this point. But I do want to clarify one thing, and that is I didn't go out to find out what would support or not support the application. I went out to see what the real situation is, because the comment was that parking lots are incompatible in the historic district, and parking lots exist, so they can't be incompatible. That was my point.
So the design guidelines do clearly differentiate above and below 3rd Avenue. And so
yes.
Briefly looking at that list, most of those were off of McLaughlin in the mixed use area. So I don't feel it's appropriate at all to compare commercial parking lots for commercial businesses
Mixed use.
off of McLaughlin in the mixed use area to above 3rd Avenue.
And that is why I differentiated. I listed which ones were residential and which ones were commercial.
Okay, and so I'll have to look at that list again, but it appeared there were maybe 4 that you had listed above 3rd Avenue.
Oh, probably, yeah, probably.
Which I would have to see them again. It's difficult to consider on that sort of at this stage without being able to actually see those items or parking lots, locations that you're listing.
So the determination that we need to make here, and which staff has asked us to make, is evaluate the contextual guideline, design appropriateness of the parking lot feature. So what do we think of the parking lots?
Chair Basinger, can I request to?
We've closed the public hearing.
There's a page in our submittal that shows, that I think is very appropriate to this discussion, and it may help the board in their deliberation of this.
Is the discussion back open?
Can we limit the chatter from the audience? So Trevor can probably tell you about what is in the record regarding parking lots, and that may be of use.
Perfect.
Yes, the applicant did submit for what you will, like a Kenema neighborhood study. And within that neighborhood study, there are several pages referencing parking lots within Kenema and talking about how his proposal ties back to those parking lots that are in Kenema already. That is within the agenda packet. It should be somewhere in there. And it kind of looks around the neighborhood and makes those comparisons.
Okay.
So.
Is that in his, do you know if it's in his submittal or in his previous submittal?
It should.
It's in this middle.
Should be in
Middle.
the middle. Yeah, I'll open it here and tell you exactly where it is. It's a large application.
So
Yeah.
some of the concerns that I've heard are that there ought to be more parking spaces, which is an argument that's fundamentally contrary to the argument that we shouldn't have parking lots. And we need to figure out just how, in the context of a cottage development, parking lots should be accommodated in a historic district. We're going crazy with our tablets here.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. You found something?
No. No. I did note that in the description of the parking lot, it was to be a flow-through material for water.
Yes.
So it's not asphalt or
Impervious.
concrete.
Permeable surface.
So the question before the Historic Review Board is the design proposed historically appropriate in context?
I feel that it is. And I go back to the overall use of having 6 homes that all blend with the area but are not like it, and that provide something that the Kenema neighborhood does not have, and it causes development of an area that is needs to be rehabilitated, which is the lots in question as well as the wetlands. So I think it's an overall win-win for the neighborhood. If you have those homes that are going to fit around a wetlands, you have to have some place for them to park. It is appropriate for it to be on site instead of on the street. And they have accommodated that.
Here you go, if you want to pass it around.
Okay. Here in the application is, and I think Grant, I see it on your tablet right there, Grant. But that's what the applicant's.
Page 38 on the.
Mine froze.
So is the design of the proposal in general, which includes parking lots, appropriate?
Yes,
Is the
with the
question.
design in general, you have to have place for them to park. Where they've got the parking is appropriate.
That's down.
And my thoughts are that, there's no doubt that large groups of surface parking are undesirable. That being said, we don't want to be overly restrictive. There's obviously not room here, or it's not available to have covered parking or outbuildings, or kind of a traditional driveway. I think we have 10 parking spots. Certainly if they were grouped in a group of 10, I can't see how that would be allowed. Split up between 4 and 6. I think 4 is consistent with the size of other parking areas above 3rd Avenue. I think 6 is heavily pushing it in my mind.
I don't think 6 is any place.
I'm speaking right now.
Yes.
So I think 6 spots in one group is heavily pushing a density of surface parking beyond what I've really seen above 4th Avenue. Now, I haven't, had a chance to visit all the sites that Ken listed, so maybe I'm not thinking of something. So to me, we're at the very edge of what is appropriate in that type of residential area.
Did you all have a chance to see?
Okay.
Okay.
For the audience, we're looking at page 38 of the applicant submittal.
Page. Oh. Any further discussions on parking? The big question is the setbacks. The application hinges, I think, on whether or not
God, where was that?
the 0 setbacks should be allowed. Preservation incentives on houses 1, 5, and 6. Observations?
I think it's clear that 5 and 6, it is definitely appropriate so that it will not infringe on the wetlands area. There's not the setback, but they are within their own lot lines.
I would add to that because of the undeveloped right-of-way in front of those houses, it provides a mitigation for the lack of a setback there from a visual standpoint.
Undeveloped you mean there's no,
Miller Street.
there's no sidewalk?
Miller Street right-of-way is, what, 50 feet? I think they're all 50-foot right-of-ways, but the street itself is only 25 feet wide.
Something like that.
There's big trees growing in the Miller Street right-of-way at 5th Avenue. Appropriateness of the 0 setbacks in Kenema. My observation of Kenema is that there are many 0 setbacks in Kenema, historic and otherwise. Part of that, I think, has to do with the basic challenges of the topography, which certainly is the reason that these setbacks, I'm sure, are in the drawings.
So it sounded like the setback in question was really related to house 1, which was that 5 foot. And
House 1 was the one that Grant?
Yeah, our previous findings were pretty clear that in my personal opinion, was that I wouldn't approve any preservation incentives, particularly against against the Cassidy House. So I felt that had a detrimental impact to the historic context of the neighborhood. Against Miller Street, I don't have as much problem with that. However, I do find it somewhat concerning that combining the cottage housing code with the preservation incentives is sort of using multiple tools to increase the amount of dwellings or the space that's on a constrained lot. So, we've heard the argument that you could fit, under other parts of the code, you could fit 4 houses with ADUs or this or that. And I think we know we have a constrained lot here, and we're using kind of multiple things to push it farther beyond each, more with the cottage housing and then more with the preservation incentives into something that's not contextually appropriate for the site.
When you stated that the setback is not occurring next to the Cassidy house, the setback is for the alley.
Yes.
Yeah,
So it's not against their property.
It brings the home closer to the Cassidy house than code allows.
Yes, it does, because there happens to be an alley between them.
I'm well aware.
Yeah.
Just for anybody in the viewing public, in the previous application, there used to be a house right here that was abutting that property line. And with the change in the application, that's the home that was removed.
Mm-hmm.
So,
One thing that we haven't really addressed tonight is the massing. I know he lowered it from 7 to 6. Do we think that 6 is still, appropriate? Especially with which in a way addresses also the setbacks and because I still have a feeling of quite a strong opinion that for the limitations on the property, everything, that 6 are still too many. That's just my humble opinion.
In our earlier hearings on the first application, May or June,
we talked more about.
We talked about the density, and we asked the applicant to consider reducing the number from 7 to 6, which he complied with, and I think we have to be as good as our word. I don't think we can present a moving target.
I don't think we did ever ask
it was
for it to be reduced from 7 to
5 or
6.
6. I thought it was 5 or 6 is what my recollection. We'd probably have to go back and look on the.
we'd have to go back and look.
We'd have to go back and look,
stuff,
because my
but-
memory could be faulty. It's happened before.
Your goal is to just look at the historic appropriateness. I don't
Not the
know
not
how
the
relevant
density.
which does include density. So I don't know how relevant it is. What was exactly the numbers at the last one?
Yeah.
This was staff's understanding was that 6 would be okay, but you didn't make a decision. You're not bound to anything. This is a different application, right?
Oh, right.
Well, certainly when you walk 3rd Avenue, you get this higher sense of density there than you do up on 4th.
It looks to me like when you're talking about density, you're talking about number of buildings. Because when you look at it with the entire thing up there, you can see that there's a lot of space that does not have any buildings on it. So it's not like it's covering the whole thing. I look at it and say that the fallback approach would be, say, okay, there can only be 1 house per platted lot. And it looked to me like the platted lots for that 100 by 100 piece where houses 4, 5, and 6 are on actually is platted so that they go from north to south, side by side. So if you did that, I think that you would still end up with the problems with having to go clear to the lot line. you'd have trouble with even getting a big house on any of those spots, and that actually 6 small ones does a better job.
May I just make a quick comment?
Yeah.
So I think one of the big things that the last application had that this one addressed. One of the big items was that the parking lot was spilling out into the right-of-way, and that was, so not everything was contained on site.
Yep.
And that this house was also encroaching on this property line up here, which the applicant had addressed as well. So those were kind of the bigger items that were in the previous application, which that were addressed here.
Well, we've gone through the conditions of approval staff recommended for the 6 houses, and we've added some conditions of approval that we would require. I've heard a couple of statements relating to the appropriateness of the design, and that really is the heart of the question here. The appropriateness given the requirements that we've stated as conditions of approval. Does that result in a overall compatibility with the neighborhood? That's the question at hand. I think I understand your position.
Yeah. Some of them.
Grant and Claire, I'd really like to hear what you have to say on those, to that question.
We can repeat that list if you like as well.
Waiting for a list.
So, or do you want to hear? I think I'm pretty aware of what's on there. But.
Okay. I can repeat it after you all had said your piece.
So, definitely the scale of the conditions, to me, is getting to the point that it is, to me, conditions for, or approval with conditions is kind of made for cases where generally the design meets the guidelines, but there are a few fine elements that can be adjusted with staff approval without the design going back. When we're talking about major architectural changes to several of the dwellings, and we have multiple pages of conditions, we're starting to get, in my opinion, outside the realm of what can be approved with conditions. I have made my position pretty clear, I think, over the last several months that I like cottage housing, and I really think that it could work in Kenema, that the scale of the dwellings, you could really build some things that are consistent and appropriate with the historic homes. However, again, this site is very difficult, which is kind of frustrating to me, because it would have been nice if we had a nice 20,000 square foot flat, unencumbered lot. That wasn't so difficult here. The current design with the homes pushed to the very edges of all the lines, I overall have a hard time justifying approving the application as being appropriate within the context of Kenema.
Claire?
I think what he just, I mean, that's really of what my opinion is too. I think, and I stated it earlier, I think that the cottage house concept is great, but to use this as the first example, test case, or because we're setting precedent with what we're doing here, and to have it in with such a difficult lot, that has its limitations, definitely. And then also being in a National Register district, it's a bridge too far, I think, for me.
Can I add one legally thing? So we have a list of conditions of approval. If it's the board's concern that you can't picture what it would look like with this list because the list is too long, then perhaps you can give the applicant an opportunity to draw it out or something like that and come back if you wanted to reopen things. Other than that, if you can condition it, you ought to condition it. If you deny it, you can deny it too, but you have to argue why the conditions won't be feasible.
Right.
And so I heard a little bit of the list is getting long, and the size of the list shouldn't matter. I mean, it's also 6 homes, so that's, I mean, you have a lot of repetition there. So I think it's 2 different questions. One is, can you imagine what it would look like with that list of conditions, or do you need more information to imagine what it would look like? Or if you don't want to approve it,
you need to
then that's fine. Staff has to come up with a recommendation that says that with findings that state why, right? And using the criteria. So we are here to support you either way, but just that context of, if you can condition it, you ought to. If you don't think that you can condition it because you don't have enough information to condition that or something like that, it's a slightly different story.
Okay. One thing because you said because the condition lists are so long, I would like to see them come back so that we have a full, because this is very, so multi-layered. That they should have, and if they can come back with drawings.
Would you like
reflecting that?
Would you like me to read you what you've added to this, just so we all have a clear idea?
Please.
Okay.
Okay. So house number 1 would be side setback should not receive preservation incentives. House number 2, no skylights facing Miller. And then in general, remove requirements for facing parking lot. Windows shall be wood. No sliding doors, all French doors. Second story, windows not exceeding door height plus a 12 or a 1 foot transom, and windows must be rectangular or square. No roof cutouts. Clarify the retaining wall. So adding that in front of the home and that spacing. And then no vertical siding facing the street.
And now I believe that I've heard the applicant say that he's okay with all of the conditions of approval that were written down prior to tonight. And even to some of the ones that we have added tonight. Except in the one dealing with setbacks. Speak.
Well, I'm in favor of accepting the application with conditions as has been delineated in the reading just now.
And earlier you were prepared to put that in the form of a motion?
Yes.
Are you still willing to do that?
Yes. I move that we accept the application for MD 1701 through MD 1706 with conditions as outlined at this meeting and written down by staff.
From what I've heard from Claire and Grant, I don't see a second to that motion coming from you. I will second the motion because I feel the need to bring this to a vote.
So you need a majority to be approved. If you don't have a majority, it's not approved. We need a staff report that supports whatever decision you make, even if it's not approval.
Okay. So
May need a second.
With two members already.
Would you like to continue and allow,
think
or
we- I
open the hearing back up to allow the applicant to provide additional information and come back next time? Or keep it record closed and something focused? Do you want to just think about this between then and next time with the record closed?
I think that the applicant deserves the opportunity to address the concerns that have been stated and state feelings regarding coming back with another continuance.
And again, it comes down to the approval criteria being met or not, not how any applicant feels or anything like that. And so it sounds like.
For that, then we will reopen the public hearing and ask Mr. Staggs to come forward and address the issues raised.
Could you repeat the latest conditions?
Sure. So everything that's kind of been said or that you've seen before, and then with house number 1, side setback shall not receive preservation incentive. House number 2.
Could I ask a question about, so that means that the preservation incentive that we're asking for on that property line in the right of way, we're saying that will be allowed? Are we saying we cannot be on the property line?
Correct.
Yes.
So it'd be a space, a separation here. House number 2, no skylights facing Miller. And then general overarching conditions would be remove requirements for the home facing parking lots, which would be me. Windows shall be wood. No sliding doors, all French doors. The second story windows not exceeding door height plus a 12-inch transom and must be rectangular or square. No roof cutouts. Clarify the retaining wall, and no vertical siding facing the street.
Can you meet those conditions?
The first one's going to be hard. And I don't, when I was listening to the discussion now, I don't feel like there was enough conversation about that. I heard different opinions on the board about that particular issue. And I think the fact that it's on a right-of-way, the visual and physical impact to the Cassidy house, I don't think is there. So
about the alley right-of-way.
Right, the right-of-way between our property and the Cassidy house. So that actually is, I would say, is a very similar condition as the homes on Miller, in that we have a buffer. We're not on someone's property line. We're on a right-of-way. So I think in the context of that conversation earlier that was happening, I don't think there was enough kind of back and forth and expression of what that really is to justify putting that in conditions tonight. But all the other conditions, I feel that we can meet.
Okay. Regarding the redrawing to reflect the conditions on the other than the setback condition on house one, is it reasonable for us to ask you to do that?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty simple request.
Okay.
I mean, we can make those adjustments.
I think that would
pretty
be a
easily.
big help, not just to us, but to the neighborhood as well, in visualizing what the outcome will be.
I would prefer to have an approval tonight. To be honest, we've been doing this for about a year now.
Yes, I
And
know.
we've complied with every request that the board has given us, and contrary to someone's earlier comment, we have complied with every request. And I'm beginning to feel a little bit like the discussions that we're having in the hearings and hearing a kind of consensus with everyone, and now we're kind of going back on those discussions and we're saying, wait a minute, we're going to do something else. It's starting to feel a little bit like that.
I understand. Board members have any questions for Mr. Staggs while he's here? This is your chance.
Nope, I don't.
Okay, thank you. And we will again close the public hearing and ask staff for clarification on where we are with the motion on the floor. Do we retract that and move instead for a continuance? Procedural question here.
Sure. We just need to know how we can best support you. So if it is the will of the board to deny it, we would need you to articulate very thoroughly why, so we can write findings, because our staff report now is for an approval with conditions. And
Okay, for that, we would need the vote.
well, you would want to vote, you could, tentatively tell us what you want to do, and we can write findings, and then you can come back next time and accept that. Right now, you don't have them, so we couldn't vote without the findings. Yeah, it would just be a tentative vote. If you wanted to do approval with conditions, you still have a motion on the floor, is that right?
Yes. And I can retract that motion, and since I made the motion, I can take the motion back, so that it's no longer on the floor.
So there was no second for that motion, just to clarify?
I did have a second
Or,
from,
I
Chair.
seconded the motion.
but you would need, oh, sorry, no, you can vote
If she's
on
going to
that.
retract the motion, then I will.
You can vote on the motion.
Well, I don't know that
just,
it's
you
gonna
wouldn't
help.
pass. So I'm sorry, I was a half step ahead. You can vote on that motion because you have a motion, you have a second, you can vote on it. If it doesn't pass, then you kind of just have to figure out what to do next, because you'll need a motion that does pass.
Okay, in that case, we'll ask you to poll the members.
Okay.
Can you read the motion, since we've,
Yes, so this would be a motion to approve the application with the conditions that were in place, with the modifications that I have read, but I'll happily reread those.
I got those.
Okay, with the modifications that were previously read earlier. So it'd be a approval with conditions, with those conditions, and then the ones that were read earlier.
Okay.
So, motion was made by, sorry, 1 second here. Okay, so board member Met,
No.
board member Mann,
yes.
board member Blythe,
No.
and Chair Basinger.
Yes.
Okay, so it is a,
So now we're stuck with the impasse and the necessity to continue to the next meeting. I believe.
Yeah, you can keep the record closed or open it, it's up to you, and have another meeting where you'll have another person.
Yes, that's
And when you
to do,
find,
and
with the complete
I,
findings, or the,
Yeah, we can come back with a revised staff report.
Yeah, I'll work on revising this.
Actually, I won't be here next month.
when you say leaving the record open or closed, can you explain that a little bit?
The choice is up to the board if you want the record open or closed. You can open up the record and accept additional testimony by everybody. And then next hearing, we would do the public comment and the applicant's rebuttal and close the testimony
We've
again.
already asked Mr. Staggs to bring in new drawings, and he's agreed that he would do that. So I
But
think,
not as a part of an official thing, right? I mean, it was just a one-on-one question. If you would like him to do that, you can recommend that he do that, open up the record, and then get that additional information, and then the public would have opportunity to comment on those drawings and the revisions next hearing. I'm hearing that we may have a 4-member board again next meeting.
I'll be here.
Were there any other additional conditions that need to be added that weren't included?
no, I don't think so. I don't think anyone suggested any. I do agree with Mr. Staggs that we didn't fully vet the question of the setback on house number 1.
So you may want to to open up the record so people can submit additional testimony. And then the applicant may choose to submit additional drawings
That seems to
To
be the
show,
appropriate
implement
thing to do.
what the recommended conditions would be. We would revise our staff report. I just need to know if I need to come back with 2 staff reports, 1 staff report. How many, do I need a denial and an approval? If I need a denial, I need greater articulation on why we're denying. Which is a lot of work on our part.
It's hard for me to give you reasons for denial since I'm in favor of approving, so I think it would have to come from someone else.
Right. Got it. Hold on, just.
And we may want to ask the applicant for continuance to the 120 if we're extending as well.
Say that again.
If we're going to continue the hearing, we may want to ask the applicant for continuance of the 120-day date. Do have 120 days to issue a final city decision. That has been extended throughout this time, I think. I'm not totally sure. But that would be your decision plus an appeal for city commission. It has to be done within a certain time frame. So if we extend it, we want to make sure that we have enough coverage within that time to make a final city decision.
So, because this is a new application, I'd say probably close to halfway through right now.
So you have to have enough time for you to make a decision, 2 weeks to pass, and someone to submit an appeal for that decision, and then us to write a staff report on the appeal and it to go before city commission within 120 days, and we're in the halfway mark. So if you extend it longer, it would be good to get a continuance of the 120-day date from the applicant, so we have the same amount of time to move forward. Particularly if you're doing it, moving in the direction of approval
I
with
can't
conditions.
make that decision for Mr. Staggs. We can open the public hearing and bring him back up
For
and
the
ask.
single person, for the single scope of asking for
Single
the
scope
continuance.
of asking the question on the amount of time that the continuance needs to be.
So if you're going to extend Well, it depends what you want to figure out what you want to do first, but if you're going to extend the hearing by 30 days, you'd ask for a 30-day continuance of the 120 date.
I think 30 days, I think we can get it done in 30 days. I just don't think it's good for the community to keep stretching this out and
Why don't you ask?
So, but do you want to do, so in this pathway, are you saying that we would do 2 staff reports, one for a request or approval with conditions and one for a denial? If so, I'd need a little bit more on the denial. Right. And then if that's what you decide to do and you would continue the application, leave the public record open, then you can get the 120, you can ask the applicant for the 120 extension. We just need to know what he's extending for, right? What are we doing?
We're extending it to give the applicant time to provide us with the visual aids that members of the board expressed concerns about.
And is it okay if when we come back, we just amend our approval with conditions recommendation? Or do I also need a second staff report with a denial? And if I do need a denial, I need to know why in a greater detail.
I don't think that we're prepared to give you that information tonight.
Could I like
but we're going to run out of time.
I mean, I can give some fairly clear comments on my position. Okay. So I think that with conditions, I still have some, very minor things. I don't think we've given the individual homes the level of scrutiny that we give most applications. However, those minor architectural issues aside, the main issues to me are the siting and the context. So of the buildable area on this application, with the exception of this kind of small block on the internal part, almost 100% of it is covered either by driveway, parking, or the homes. So the siting and specifically what I would term the crowding, because it's not a density in a matter of homes per square foot, but a crowding of the dwellings against each other and against the existing homes, to me, is out of context with the neighborhood. Looking at that overall, I feel it provides is a unsatisfactory overall impact on the historic characteristics of the neighborhood. I think, it's maybe not relevant here, but in general, if this whole area, the whole lots were buildable, if say house 3 were able to be moved down to the 5th Avenue right of way, house 2 could move farther down, spaced out, that we weren't encroaching on any of the normal zone setbacks for cottage housing and for R6, to me, that would be a much more acceptable design. But I don't think the current or the topography and the wetlands allow for that type of design or spacing in this case.
For that, you'd be asking for 5th Avenue right-of-way to be extended through there, and I really question the practicality of that actually happening.
I agree that whether it's practical or not. I think if 5th Avenue were there and you were to move house 3 down to the bottom left corner there, you remove house 2 farther south, you were to move a couple parking spots down off 5th Avenue into 3 parking areas, then you're getting into a type of design that's not overburdening any specific spot in the neighborhood with too much crowding or density. So for me, it's not a square footage area, but it's really a crowding around the existing dwellings, the existing housing that's there.
Just an FYI, I just looked at it. So the 120 would be October 14th, and currently we are at 67 days.
We are at how many?
We're at 67.
67.
The 120 will be October 14th.
So I'd be uncomfortable extending without this 120-day extension.
Because say you come back on August, I don't know, 26th. It's not a lot of time between August 26th and October 14th.
No. We're already in August.
I mean, September. Yeah,
Yeah.
September.
Had me.
September and October. Yeah, it gives 2 weeks-ish.
Your recommendation on that?
The recommendation. So one is if you want to take a break, we can at any time because it's been a rather long meeting. Two is you can, we've heard Board Member Blythe's concerns. We can, if you continue it, we can go back and take a look at it. We could come up with, if there are perhaps additional recommendations for conditions of approval to add to address some of those concerns, we can. If not, we can think about doing 2 separate staff reports, one for recommendation of approval and one for recommendation of denial based off Board Member Blythe's comments. But at the same time, you can ask the applicant if they'd like to extend the 120-day date and keep the record open and get new information to see if that is helpful in your decision-making process.
It sounds to me like the 2 staff reports is
Not ideal,
the way to go.
but I mean, it's, if you have a split board, that's sort of what you have to do.
Yeah.
We just needed to know the rationale so we could write it in a legally defensible way.
Okay. And do you feel that you have enough input to do that?
Yeah, the more input, the better. We'll go back and watch all of these videos to make sure we have it right.
Okay.
But it sounds like it's just the overall context of everything.
That would be, I think, the most logical way to go from where we are right now. Covers us in both eventualities.
Then I would recommend that you reopen the public hearing, ask the applicant if they would like to extend the 120-day date.
Okay.
And then you can request that they submit new
30 days, is that
information,
what
but you can't require them.
By 30 days, is that what you,
Yeah, for extending things a month.
okay.
So we will reopen the public hearing and ask Mr. Staggs to again come up and answer that question if you understood it. Do you want to extend the 120-day cycle on the application by another 30 days? You'll have to come up to the mic to.
Honestly, I'm not crystal clear on what's happening right now,
So
to be honest. I'm not crystal clear on, I'm hearing about half of what's happening right now, so.
Okay. The board is split, and in those circumstances, the option that seems to best suit the occasion is for staff to write 2 staff reports, one that provides the reason and rationale behind the denial, and one that writes the conditions for approval. When we actually conduct the vote, if a majority rules one way or the other, then the appropriate staff report would be the one that we would follow.
I think the key component of that too is that the public comment period would be open, and so we would receive additional information, including opportunities for you to provide the revised designs with those conditions that they identified for their consideration. Right, so if they could picture the conditions or if you want to amend your report in some way to address the concerns that they've identified. Both the public as well as the applicant would have the opportunity to comment.
I see. I think I need to understand better. It would appear to me from where I'm sitting and what I'm hearing that the current conditions of approval that we've been discussing tonight would not meet Mr. Blythe's concerns. So even if I go and redraw everything and make all those conditions in a drawing that shows those conditions, he has concerns that are beyond those conditions. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
And could we repeat those concerns again? I can only hear half of what was happening earlier.
All right, so my concerns are around the overall siting and context of the homes. I think that individually, the designs of the homes with the conditions that we've listed are pretty much just a state that they're acceptable in my mind. However, what I've kind of termed the crowding of the homes, I find to be detrimental to the historic characteristics of the neighborhood. So I think that from a square footage standpoint, I think that these 6 houses and their current layouts would be acceptable for 20,000 square feet total. However, because they're pushed all the way up and out because of the wetland, I feel that they crowd the Cassidy house and the house to the west in an inappropriate manner from a siting and context. As an example, what I gave was if you could move or house 3 to the very southwest corner of the site and move a couple of the parking spots down, move the second house down a little south, spread them out and create maybe 3 points of entry access. To me, something like that would be acceptable as an example. I realize that that's not necessarily practical in this state. With the 2 points of entry that are existing, I think that if perhaps house 2 were removed, and then house 1 could be reconfigured to be perhaps longer or oriented lengthwise instead of horizontally, so that it's not infringing on the code setback. I think that would be acceptable in my mind. So overall, I think that the crowding of the homes against the right-of-way access points and against the existing structures is too great right now.
So that same logic would follow with houses 4, 5, and 6 as well.
I realize that this is getting into somewhat subjective territory of how crowding is, but I think that 4, 5, and 6 are roughly okay as they are for the amount of land that's available there and the distance from the existing structures.
Because they're set back.
Could I also ask for clarity from Mrs. Met on what your concerns are?
A lot of similarity to what, Grant has stated. Not the massing, but the siting. To me, 5 and 6 and 2 and 3 are very close together. Which I know with cottage, housing, that is often the case. But with the restrictions that this property requires, I just, with it being, oh God, hold on. I'm trying to gather my, should have written it down. Just with the massing that it has and right up against the wetlands like that. And it's just for the historic the historic district, I just, don't think it's appropriate, but I also agree with Grant in that I think a lot of the conditions that you that we've set have satisfied a lot of my concerns about the architectural detailing. I didn't say that right, but.
I'm concerned that another continuance and a process of developing and drawing everything that we've talked about tonight, which I mean, the short answer to the question about the 30-day continuance is we would be, that would be acceptable. But when I listen to Mr. Blythe and Mrs. Met about their concerns, I'm questioning, because it sounds like the direction they're going is basically we're eliminating another house in order for this to work. To move house number 3 to the southwest corner is not feasible because it crosses over the wetland and it impedes on the wetland, and we can't build it because you can't drive a truck over the wetland. And we're going to have a concrete truck there pouring concrete someday. So that's not feasible. However, I think we could space house number 2 and 3 further apart than they currently are. Right now, we're abiding by the cottage home guidelines of spacing between cottages, which is the city code for spacing between cottages. So the site's a little bit like a Swiss watch, it's, things are in the place for very specific reasons. But I think we could have more space between house number 2 and 3, and certainly between houses 4 and 5, more space. But I don't imagine a way to move the parking from where it currently is. And, so we're starting to kind of get into a design exercise here, during the hearing, and we probably don't want to do that. So I guess the answer to the question about a continuance for 30 days is yes, I would be willing to do that with very, very clear direction on what I need to come back with in order to achieve approval.
Okay. That's a reasonable request. Can we provide that? That's the question for Grant and Claire. Can we provide a clear direction on what we're asking the applicant to do?
On house 4, to the left of it, there's that open area, and on the diagram on page 7 shows there's a bunch of trees there, and I'm not sure if those are existing. I mean, is there a reason why it can't be moved over further? I guess it because the wetland juts up there.
Any trees shown there between house number 4 and the on the property there is new. There are no trees there now.
Okay, that's right. There isn't. Okay.
So yes, we can we can adjust the position of house number 4 more towards the west, but it would bring it closer to the property line
Yeah.
to the Cassidy house, which is sort of why it's where it's at.
Let's also say that additionally there is technically right-of-way through here, and there are some issues that pop up with building in right-of-way.
Oh, yeah.
Even though,
That's, yeah.
even though, but there are technically issues with it.
You could shift 3 over closer to 4 to get it away from the neighboring property.
With the exception of houses 5 and 6 and 1, the houses are all within the underlying, the zoning setbacks. And remember, too, that in Kenema, we have a lot of conditions where there are houses right on the property line in many, many areas.
That is true.
Mm-hmm.
So I would suggest that what we're doing here is very compatible with Kenema.
So I'm going to ask again, what direction can we give the applicant regarding changes that would make his application acceptable to you?
There's really not
Well, given that it sounds like there's no practical way to
move them.
add access from the Fifth Avenue right away or to move any structure onto that side, so that's out. The structures being any smaller would not be desirable from a livability standpoint or from a design standpoint. To me, that leaves removing a structure. I think that removing one and then reducing of the parking would give spacing, better context, better sighting. I think 5 could be approved. I don't have any problem with the Miller Street setbacks.
I would like to ask staff to do a review of the direction that we gave to the applicant last time we went through this same exercise, specifically regarding the number of cottages. Because my memory is that we said reduce it from 7 to 6. And I think Grant, one of you said you thought it was reduce it from 7 to 6 or 5. I think that needs to be clarified, because if we said 6, I feel that we're obligated to stand by what we aren't allowed to give a moving target. If we said 6 and the applicant complied, I think we're compelled to approve.
From my collection, and I totally agree with you on that. From what my memory of it is, and that's why we have tapes, thank God, is that we asked them to reduce reduce the number of structures of cottages. Because when we came back to the subsequent meeting, when I saw 6, I thought, oh, he only got rid of 1.
Okay.
So
I think before we can provide you with the definitive direction that you need tonight, we need to answer that question, because if we already gave that direction, I think we have to stand by it.
You never voted on it, actually. You were going towards denial when it was 7 homes, and the parking lots were in the right-of-way. And you said collectively, that's too much. And so the applicant withdrew the application, substantially changing it by reducing the number of units, putting all of the parking lot on site, and then moving the buildings around. Also, there was concern for homes that were too close to the Cassidy home. And so he made all those changes and then came back. So you never voted on anything. You would have voted on a denial off the 7 with the parking lots in the right-of-way. This is different. It's a different application. So
I don't know if we specifically said 6. It's because like I said, when we got the subsequent.
I don't know if that's all that relevant, to be honest. I know that we keep going back to that, but the question is it appropriate for Kenema? So given what you have here, can you amend this in any way so that it is acceptable or not? I appreciate the keeping our word, but you never actually, there was no votes. It was withdrawn, resubmitted, and it was substantially different when it was resubmitted. Right, because there's not all this stuff in the right-of-way that there used to be, and the placement's different, and it's now 6 instead of 7. And so if you want to add more conditions about moving 3 around or 4 around, you can certainly,
Well,
I mean, it's your staff report, so.
What Mr. Staggs is asking for is clear direction, and we have to give that to him.
We can watch the tapes and come up with recommendations, but.
He wants to come back here next month with an application that satisfies the members who are not in support of this
And I
design.
appreciate that, but also, it's part of our charge to,
It may be a denial. You don't know.
I think that I could reach a decision tonight in favor with 5 structures, with the conditions that we've listed, if that would be preferable. I don't see any other direction that would get me to a point that I could approve the application, unless there's something that I'm not thinking of.
And I tend to agree, and I really appreciate that, they seem very willing to go with the conditions that we've set. But I agree. I think, 5, and I don't know if it pencils out or what, but it has to be what's right for the property and for Kenema, not just because we have to approve something or not approve something.
Yeah.
And I just think the density is probably the biggest, yes, some of the designs kind of were glaring, but to me, the density in that neighborhood and with the streets, just the conditions of the surrounding neighborhoods and stuff.
So Chair Basinger, perhaps we can continue on the same path. If the applicant is willing to extend the 120, you can continue, leave the public comment period open. We can come back with 2 staff reports, one that we discussed and one with 5 units. So they're both approval with conditions, but one's 5 units instead of the 6.
Yes.
How do you decide which one to use?
Can I answer? I'm sorry. The board would accept the public comments that come in between now and then. We would go through this again, and the board members would take all of that information into consideration and make a decision next month.
And you'd have a staff report reflecting either one.
Yeah, I mean,
The two, right, a staff report for each position.
but then you can have more time to get more comments on this and.
So, Mr. Staggs,
Could I make one comment first?
sure.
Just really, sorry. And I'd like to, if you look at the drawings, and I don't have it in front of me, but we've done some three-dimensional perspective views that are in the package. One particular one on 4th, showing the house in its context. I personally believe that what we've shown in our documents and drawings reflect a development, a project, a collection of cottage homes that, if you combine the homes, the landscaping, and look at it in the context, it is very compatible with Kenema. So
So Chair Basinger,
yeah,
sorry to
we're
interrupt.
probably getting into territory here that, yeah.
The question is, do you want to continue?
Yeah,
I want to.
Sorry. I just wanted to make sure that
the question
had
for
seen all the
you
drawings and actually
is-
read everything and seen everything.
Yes,
So,
I have. The question for you, though, is do you want to extend the
120-day date.
120-day period, the continuance for 30 days on the hearing, keep the public record open so that you can return with a modified application that will
additional
sell
material.
this to the board members who are not going to support it otherwise.
I don't think I have a choice whether or not to continue. So, and we really can't make a decision tonight anyways, right?
No.
Because we don't have.
That's correct.
So I think that's really the only path
Okay.
forward. And it's not a resubmittal or a change in our application. It's just additional material illustrating what we're doing, essentially. Is that correct?
Well, Mr. Blythe and Ms. Matt have, you asked them the question, what could you do to get their vote in favor? And they have told you that, whether it's acceptable to you or not.
Right. To reduce by a house, basically. Correct. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, I think that would be acceptable.
Okay.
My understanding of the process, I don't know. I would be okay if we were to add that as a condition to what we've listed and approve that
the vote.
with staff. I could approve that tonight, I think, if that's, and
Change
then
the
staff can
vote.
come back with the revised.
Revote that.
Yeah.
I think we've answered the question that Mr. Turway had about the continuance and the extension of the 120-day time period. And so at this point, we can close the public hearing again. And that would give Mr. Blythe the opportunity perhaps to make a motion with what you just stated.
Would like some assistance?
All right.
So it sounds like the motion is for approval of MD 1701 through MD 1706 with the conditions of approval Trevor has already listed tonight, as well as an additional condition of approval, which would reduce the overall number of homes on the site to 5.
No, may I get specific with this as well? Is there a specific home that you want? Is it, because these are all things that are going to be asked, is there a specific home? Is there a specific configuration you're okay with? Just because any significant change, we'll be back here.
My suggestion would be that it be number 2, and then number 1 could be oriented or adjusted such that it can maintain the size or be similar size, but not have to, so it can extend farther back in the lot, but not encroach on the setback, so that that setback can comply with code.
So not necessarily reorient, but just comply with the setback, whatever that means.
Yeah, I don't really, it doesn't have to be completely rotated 90 degrees. It can just be kind of smushed, but my suggestion would be that number 2 could go away. A parking spot on the site can go away, and number 1 can be oriented such that, or adjusted such that it complies with the code setbacks.
You could
That seems
also
like the
leave,
most logical to me,
you
but
could also leave the parking lots, the number of parking spaces still the same if possible. Then that way you wouldn't have to worry about on-street, off-street parking, or on-street parking and stuff, any overload.
yeah.
So was that you?
Yeah,
made
that
the
was my
motion?
question. No, I'm not making any motion. So that was my question to you is if you want to make a motion, I guess, would that be included in your motion? Would that be your motion to remove house number 2?
Yeah.
With the,
So moved, if that's appropriate, or do I need to say the whole thing?
So the motion is to request proposed MD 1701 through MD 1706 with the conditions of approval as stated earlier tonight, which do include the compliance for the side yard setback for Lot 1. An additional condition of approval will also be added to remove House 2.
Second.
Very good. It's been moved and seconded. Can we poll the board members?
yes. So, okay, 1 second. Motion. Okay. So board member Met,
Aye.
board member Mann,
Aye.
board member Blythe,
Aye.
and Chair Basinger.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 4-0. Which
I want to
means-
thank everybody for the time, energy, and effort that you've put into all of this. It is, we knew coming in that it was a difficult process, and nothing we did made it any easier.
So
I thank you all.
So we're not, but you're coming back with a
So I will be sending out a staff report
okay.
with
The notice of
a
decision.
notice of decision, I'm sorry, a notice of
Okay,
decision
right.
with the updated conditions and findings within the next week or so. To anybody who's submitted comments to the board and to the applicant. So, and then after that is sent out, there is a 10-day appeal period. 14-day appeal period that goes to the city commission.
Okay.
Just FYI.
Okay.
Item 4 on our agenda,
You mean there's other things on?
grant requests. We have a request for grant to refinish windows at 910 Washington Street. And we're going to get through this.
Really quickly. Is this the gentleman here? Poor guy.
That's it.
You poor guy.
Please, well, we're going to have a staff report first, and then we'll bring you up.
I've never done this before. I hope it doesn't take as long as.
No.
No.
I hope it's not as complicated as the last one.
Do we want to, this is just a suggestion, do you want to take like a 2 or 3 minute break just to use the restroom quickly?
I'm content to proceed, but okay,
yes.
we will do that. We will
Sorry
take a
about
5 or
that.
10 minute break.
After 9 to get down there.
Oh, wow.
Got down there just as it was, starting. It was perfect.
All right, we will reconvene now and proceed with item 4 on the agenda.
Oops, sorry.
Okay. So the item before you is a Historic Review Board preservation grant for Bill and Judy Schumann at 910 Washington Street. And the proposal is to refinish trim and mostly the windows trim and soffits on the existing home. So here's a Google Street View of what the house looks like. Let's see here. So going into it, so here's some of the areas that are of concern. There are a whole mess of pictures, but I picked out some of the ones that made some of the bigger points. A lot of the paint is peeling. Some of the boards have some issues going on. So the proposal, the grant would be to refinish these surfaces basically and replace any wood that needs to be replaced.
As you can see here, just some paint peeling. Maybe it's holding moisture more than it should be. Things along those lines. You can see up here more paint peeling up along these windows here, and then some splitting of the windows in this picture. Here, we additionally, there will be resurfacing and refinishing of caulking on some of the windows and some of the painting. So just be doing this general maintenance stuff to preserve the integrity of the windows over the next many years. And so the staff would recommend approval of the $1,000 grant that has been requested. That being said, the applicant did submit something prior that was, or did submit something in addition that was for also garages that are not located on this parcel but on the back parcel. So there was a request that if you could allocate more, then that would be much appreciated to kind of help offset, because he's going to be doing that as well, but not as part of this
That was
application.
withdrawn.
That was withdrawn, yes.
Okay.
So we're just looking at this
Just
window.
looking at this one, yeah.
Okay.
So we're dealing with the windows. We will now ask the applicant to come to the table, state your name for the record, and then you will have time to present your submittal.
Okay, my name's Bill Schuman, and I live at 910 Washington Street. Been a resident in Oregon City since 1990. I don't know what to say. I might say, though, along with that grant, there was also another building on the property which was built in approximately 1920s, and that was a playhouse for the Bush family children. And that was also on the pictures, that also needed some attention. And basically why my wife and I are, my wife actually asked a board to classify our home as historical because it belonged to the Bush family at one time, and we wanted that designation. We wanted our home to be designated as part of the historical area and a historical home. And why we're applying this, we want this home to stay, in good shape. And the paint job was done in 1995 prior to this, so it's lasted for quite a long time, but it's overdue for the maintenance, and I don't want to let it go any longer because you could see the shape. The wood is starting to split, and they're putting a seal coat over the paint and then over the wood, and then 2 coats of paint and primer. So it will be, in good shape once the trim is done. And there's a lot, what you don't see on those pictures of the front of the house, there's a soffit area that goes completely around the house. And so there's quite a bit of wood trim involved in the house, although the body is stucco, and that's in relatively good shape.
Do any board members have questions of the applicant? In that case, we thank you, and we will.
Oh, I might add, if the board could see to a little bit more than $1,000, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now close the public hearing and discuss the application. Any comments?
What are the available funds?
That was, yeah.
So we've done 2 this year. The most recent one's for the Rose Farm. There was another one prior to that, but that was in last year's budget cycle. So we have 3,000 left this year.
And that's to last us through
Through the year, or through
July
next
1st of 2018.
And what's not used, but on July 1st can carry over to the next year.
Oh, it can. Okay.
Yeah, it just can't carry over after that to the year following. It has to stay within our budget cycle. For biennium.
And we can
3,000.
add supplemental funds if there's leftover at the end of the year. Is that?
I don't know.
Say that one more time.
If we get to the end of the year and all the funds haven't been allocated, we can go back to the existing projects and add supplemental funds to max out or no?
I don't know, because we usually request that the work has not been done yet, not yet been done.
Right, and it has to be done, within a calendar year of when
Yeah.
it's approved? Yeah.
But any homeowner can come back with another project on their property and do another thing for another $1,000 or however much.
I applaud you for your project.
It is a project.
Is there any other discussion?
If there's no further discussion, I would certainly entertain a motion for approval.
I guess to me, there's, it's pretty straightforward. I guess the only thing, he is requesting a little bit more, but yet we don't know what other applications are out there, and that's the crux of the thing. I would vote to approve on.
Would you make a motion?
Yeah, sorry, it's getting late. I move that we approve $1,000 on it's HRB 17-471? No, 4A, excuse me.
Second.
Okay. 1 second. Okay. So Board Member Met,
Aye.
Board Member Mann,
Aye.
Board Member Blythe,
Aye.
and Chair Basinger.
Aye.
Okay. So is approval of the grant.
All right.
We would like to give you more, but.
Pardon?
We would love to give you more, but have to be fiscally responsible.
Yes, I understand. And I'm happy with your decision.
See, that was almost painless, wasn't it?
It was.
Most of our
Thank you.
decisions aren't quite as drawn out as that one.
No.
Item 5 on the agenda is communications. Communicate quickly.
Oh, yeah, so quick upcoming items. Next month, Kelly Reed will be here, one of our planners, to talk to you about some trail information. So she'll have a nice presentation for you, the Kenema McLaughlin Trail. And then I'll send you all a copy in the mail as well. But we just got our welcome wagon packets, and I don't know if you were here when that happened, but just to give a quick recap, this just came in today. We had a CLG grant to do education within Oregon City, and they were used to put together welcome, informational packets, kind of go over the promenade, the elevator, the library, and then the historic districts. And we finally got those. They're printed on some nice heavier weight gloss paper that we'll put in envelopes and send to everybody who owns a historic home within Oregon City. So look forward to that in the mail within the next 2 weeks or so.
Great.
That's awesome.
And then we'll likely also have a presentation from Carrie Richter, our Assistant City Attorney, and we'll go through a longer spiel about the legal rules to running HRB. It's something that we anticipate doing every January, but our board members changed so frequently this year. We were waiting for a full board, and now we have that. So we'll answer any legal questions, any and all legal questions you have.
So the welcome wagon, are you going to work with the chamber? with those, or is that something that just strictly comes from the city?
It's, right now, we just have the funds to send it out to individual homeowners and not like mass produced. I'm sure we could,
Okay.
we have the PDFs, it wouldn't be hard, it would just be up to maybe the chamber to print off
And to
copies.
get
It would
sponsors and
be-
stuff, because that would be really,
It would be really useful if you could find a way to get that to real estate offices
That
who do
might
business.
be a helpful idea, yes.
We'll email it out to different agencies
I'm
and
pretty
neighborhood
sure our
associations.
office will have it.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that we send it, we have a connection at the Portland Metropolitan Realtors Association, so they can distribute it.
Yep.
when, and even with like the chamber, even working with, getting some sponsors to print some of that up if the city, doesn't have funding for it. Because that's something that would be nice to have.
Yeah.
Long time ago, we had Welcome Wagon.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
In that case, we'll call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.